Good evening and welcome to Pittsburgh City Council's Cablecast public hearing for Wednesday, November 20th, relative to Bill 2024-0701. Will the clerk please read the title of the bill?
Bill 0701, ordinance amending the Pittsburgh Code Title 9, Zoning, Article 5, Section 911.02, Use Table, Section 911.04, Use Standards, by changing use types and review procedures regarding residential uses in residential districts in the city of Pittsburgh.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And for the record, we are joined by Council members Anthony Coghill and Councilwoman Barbara Warwick, and we'll be joined by other members shortly. We are also joined by Councilwoman Erica Strasburger, who is online, and Council President Pro Tem Bobby Wilson. For our first order of business, we will have an introduction by Sean Carter. He's our legislative liaison, and then we'll follow it by testimony from our registered speakers. And Sean, I don't know where he is.
He's right here. He's right here.
Sean.
I'm right here.
Okay. So with Sean, let me just to give you everybody a little update. Sean Carter is going to tell us there's several bills. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of misinformation being shared. He has many years of legislative work here in the city of Pittsburgh, and he's going to help us work through this process and how we are where we are today. And with that said, Sean, are you ready? Sean Carter.
Thank you, members of the City Council, citizens. I'm Sean Carter. I'm Legislative Projects Manager for Pittsburgh City Council in the Office of the City Clerk. And we're here tonight on Council Bill 2024-0701. So why are we here today? Councilwoman Cal Smith introduced in City Council back in July Bill 701, which proposes to change only the approving body for community homes, currently the zoning board via special exception, to City Council via conditional use in residential zoning districts, so R1A, R1D, R2, R3, RM. What is a conditional use? A conditional use is similar to a special exception. It is a permitted use that is made subject to the review and approval of City Council instead of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. And several other uses require approval by conditional use. Certain assisted living facilities, bed and breakfast, custodial care facilities, hospitals, and large schools, like elementary schools, middle schools, high schools that have more than 75 students. The primary procedural difference, because we've received some feedback to the clerk's office this week, so the primary procedural difference between a conditional use, which is approved by City Council, and the special exception, which is approved by the Zoning Board, is that in a conditional use application, the Planning Commission first holds a hearing and renders a recommendation to City Council regarding the application, who then holds a second public hearing before deciding whether to grant or deny the application. And people are concerned that in a conditional use hearing, they would only be limited to 3 minutes to testify, to express their concerns, but that's not how conditional use hearings work. When City Council holds a conditional use hearing, they use the identical procedures that the Zoning Board uses in a special exception. So they have to give mail and posted notice. The zoning administrator typically gives a presentation describing the application. The applicant makes a presentation. The abutting property owners are afforded the opportunity to testify, submit evidence, ask questions of the applicant. They are not limited to 3 minutes like they would be in a traditional council public hearing like you will be tonight. The applicant is then afforded the opportunity to rebut the testimony of the abutting property owners, raise questions of standing, and make additional arguments, and then council has 45 days to issue findings of fact, conclusions of law, and their decision. So how we got to this piece of legislation is 7 months ago, an illegal custodial care facility with no valid zoning approval began operating in a former hotel in the Banksville neighborhood without any community notification. Inquiries to the Department of Corrections, the Board of Pardons and Parole, City Planning, the Office of the Mayor, the Department of Public Safety resulted in no one having any idea how it happened. However, Councilwoman Cal Smith, at the request of her constituents, called a community meeting, and once all the parties were brought to the meeting, It turns out it was a state agency which was paying a nonprofit agency who then paid the proprietor to house the ex-offenders. The state agency concluded that zoning and permitting issues were for the city to manage, and only when everyone was in the same room was the situation resolved, and the state agreed to relocate the ex-offenders, except they're actually still there. Then on the 4th of July, we open the Post-Gazette and we find this. Marion Manor, a 178-room assisted living facility nestled in the middle of Banksville. You would not find it if you did not know where it was. Closes after many years. And according to the newspaper article, there were people pitching it for different types of transitional and homeless housing. And then on July the 9th, Councilwoman Cal Smith introduces this legislation. And then a week later, when the Planning Commission issued its agenda for an upcoming meeting, was the first time that Councilwoman Cal Smith was made aware that there was a second piece of legislation making its way through the process. And so, just like it was for us, we imagine it is for the public, a great deal of confusion about the two different zoning bills submitted to City Council. And there are two different zoning bills. There is the one we're here discussing tonight, which is community homes, introduced by Councilwoman Cal Smith. And then there's what I'll call the omnibus zoning amendments submitted to City Council by the Planning Commission. So now I'm going to give you all of the bad news at once. The residents, the property owners, the taxpayers of the city do not understand the reasons for or the potential impacts of the legislation being referred to as the Fair Housing Ordinance, approved by the Planning Commission back on September the 3rd. Why do we keep referring to the Commission's Fair Housing Amendments, which are not the subject of tonight's public hearing? Council Bill 701, Councilwoman Cal Smith's bill, and the Planning Commission's Fair Housing Amendments, now Bill 984, approved by the Commission on September the 3rd, suffer from an irreconcilable conflict. Bill 701 purports to change the regulations for community homes, but the Commission's Fair Housing Amendment proposes to eliminate community homes as a use in the zoning code in favor of a redefined and vastly expanded definition of personal care homes and family. So in their current forms, they cannot both pass City Council. Now, the Department of City Planning said the following about the Fair Housing Amendments on October the 1st. The purpose of the amendments is to address fair housing deficiencies within the zoning code, to correct vague and confusing definitions and categories for group housing uses, to remove community homes from the zoning code because they found it to be confusing and problematic due to the purview and the intent of the use and the overlap with other group uses and industry standards and licensing norms and definitions for personal care homes. Which takes us to the Fair Housing Act. What's the Fair Housing Act? It's Title VIII of the Civil Rights Act of 1968. It's intended to prohibit discrimination in housing based on race, religion, national origin, sex, and after 1988, to protect people with disabilities and families with children. So what is the city required to do? The city is prohibited from treating groups of unrelated persons with disabilities less favorably than groups of unrelated persons without disabilities. So does the zoning code discriminate against people with disabilities? Well, let's take a look. There are three definitions for family in the zoning code, and we'll go over the first two because these are for unrelated persons without disabilities. So the first definition of family is an individual or two or more individuals related by blood, marriage, or adoption in a dwelling unit, or a group of not more than three unrelated individuals. Next slide. But for unrelated persons with disabilities, family is defined as a group of not more than 8 unrelated disabled persons living together in a dwelling unit. So that means that currently a group of up to 8 unrelated disabled persons and a staff person not included in the total can occupy any single family dwelling unit as a use by right. That's City Council's 25-year commitment to the Fair Housing Act. Our zoning code does not treat groups of disabled persons less favorably than non-disabled persons, and so is not in violation of the Fair Housing Act. But what about housing for groups of more than 8 disabled persons? That's exactly why City Council many years ago created the community home use to accommodate larger groups of disabled persons, and City Council amended the zoning code in 2003 to ensure that it complied with the Fair Housing Act. But the changes that resulted from the 2003 amendments specifically defined disabled in community home using the Fair Housing Act's definition, but it excluded custodial care facilities and halfway houses for persons leaving correctional facilities. So City Council ensured to the greatest extent legally possible that only those persons protected by the Fair Housing Act were included in the use for community homes. There's the definition for community home. Next slide, please. So the zoning code does comply with the Fair Housing Act. So why does everybody believe the zoning code is in violation of the Fair Housing Act? Because City Council was presented with misinformation regarding the need for the Fair Housing Bill as a solution to a legal problem which does not exist. And there are serious dangers in misapplying the Fair Housing Act. Claiming a violation of the Fair Housing Act as a pretext to enact policy preferences which, while possibly valid in their own right, are neither necessary nor required by federal law, one, does a tremendous disservice to those persons who desperately need the protections of the Fair Housing Act against rampant housing discrimination, and jeopardizes the Fair Housing Act itself. Because of these 6 guys: the Republican supermajority on the U.S. Supreme Court, who, in 2015, just barely recognized disparate impact as judicially cognizable under the Fair Housing Act. So improperly applying the Fair Housing Act, where no violation has occurred or is evident, risks sending the Fair Housing Act back to the Supreme Court with its 6-3 majority and could potentially destroy the act. And of relevant importance, the zoning administrator told us on October the 1st at that public hearing before the Planning Commission that the city is not facing a lawsuit. So what does the Planning Commission's legislation propose to do? They're updating definitions and regulations for assisted living facilities and senior housing, merging personal care residents and community homes into a new use, personal care homes. And it changes the regulations and public process related to conversions of former nursing homes, hospitals, and schools. Now, back in October, Councilwoman Cale Smith sent a letter to her constituents in Council District 2. The first concern she raised was that the Planning Commission's fair housing proposal will allow residential group homes of up to 10 people in any building or house in the city without any community notification or public process. And that's a fact. Currently, a personal care residence, which requires an administrator exception in nearly every zoning district in the city, is limited to a maximum of 8 clients. 10 people, 8 clients. So currently, personal care residents cannot currently house 10 residents. Currently, those personal care houses require the approval of the zoning administrator, which means there is at least some local review of an application. The Planning Commission's Fair Housing Ordinance not only changes personal care residences to personal care homes, increases the number of clients, but in changing the approval process from an administrative exception to a use by right, they eliminate the obligation to conspicuously post notices on the property in question, denying the residents any notice at all. And on October the 14th, we received responses to Councilwoman Cale Smith's letter, suggesting that the substantive changes in City Planning's bill simply clarifies that 10 disabled people can be allowed to live in a typical residential setting, and to require that those types of small group living residences are appropriately licensed. Except the legislation they sent to City Council does not require personal care homes to be licensed. So back to what the intention is for this use. They're collapsing personal care residences and community homes into personal care homes. But here's the problem with that. In September of 2023, the Pennsylvania Assisted Living Association reported that more than 230 licensed personal care homes have closed in Pennsylvania since 2020. Currently, persons who are disabled have the choice of residing in either a personal care residence, oops, misspelled that, or a community home. The Planning Commission legislation would collapse those two choices into a single choice, personal care homes. Well, personal care homes are the use most likely to fail. So we could be inadvertently pushing people protected by the Fair Housing Act into a single option, which is likely to close, leaving them with no options. Councilwoman Cal Smith's second concern was that allowing the Department of City Planning to approve changing a school or a nursing home into a large residential use, such as a homeless shelter, without any community notification or public process. And this is from their ordinance. The zoning administrator is authorized to allow a change of use from either a conforming or non-conforming use, such as a school or a hospital, to a group residential use, and that this exception shall supersede the use table. The use table is simply a spreadsheet that tells us which, for any use that you would apply for, the approval process required to file the application. So, last month we saw in the public reporting that the Pittsburgh Public School District intends on closing some number of schools. We'll start with this one. Right in the heart of Mount Washington is Whittier Elementary School. It's tragically one of the schools slotted to be closed. But here's the reality of school closures. The Board of Public Education is highly unlikely to sell their growing portfolio of closed school buildings to entities who intend to use them to open more charter schools. In fact, the district is likely to insist on covenants to expressly forbid these buildings to ever again be used as schools. So that only leaves other types of institutional or group residential uses, the kind which typically require a change from one use to another. Now, under the current zoning code, a change from one non-conforming use to another non-conforming use must be approved by special exception after notice to abutting property owners and a hearing before the zoning board, where the applicant carries the burden of proving that the change in use will not result in greater impacts to nearby residents than the previous use. However, a change from, say, an elementary or a high school to, say, a large homeless shelter would not be allowed, even as a special exception, because a school is not a non-conforming use. So to do so under the current zoning code would require a use variance, an almost impossible application to get past the zoning board. So allowing the Department of City Planning to approve changing a school or a nursing home without much community notification or public process, that's also a fact. Let's go to slide 58. Oh, you're already there. So the other concern that was raised in response to Councilwoman Cal Smith's October letter was the substantive change in the housing bill will remove costly red tape around changing between one group housing or institutional use and another group housing use. Sorry, okay, so what red tape are we talking about? The right of nearby property owners, residents, and their council members to be formally notified of applications for large institutional uses, literally right next door to their homes. The right to a public hearing on the application before the zoning board, and the right of abutting property owners and residents to lawfully object to the application. And why does this matter? See those blue dots next to that school? Those are people who are legally entitled to be notified by posting and by mail for anything that's going to happen to that school, unless we pass this bill. Next slide, please. Let's go to 67. We're going to get the people their public comment. So this change has nothing to do with compliance with the Fair Housing Act. It could deprive residents and property owners of due process. I think I've taken up enough of your time. I want to get to the public comment. And so I thank you for your indulgence, and thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. And now you see he's one of the smartest people down here, and he's actually helping me through this whole process because just to be real clear, we're also joined by Councilwoman Deb Gross. I want to thank Public Safety Director Lee Schmidt, who's here, and our Sergeant at Arms, both of them, and our clerk's office, and our community engagement office, and our cable bureau, and everybody who's working here today to make sure that you had an evening meeting. The reason we scheduled this in the evening downtown is because when we were trying to have the meeting during the day, people requested that we have it in the evening. So I scheduled in the evening. I didn't know there was going to be a tornado warning, and I apologize that a lot of people got their letters late today. So, but we did try to get the letters out as fast as we could, but it was a massive mailing, and it was a lot. So I can tell you this, if this goes any further, my staff is already working on the mailer that will go out next, and it will be much more intense than what we sent out. But I will say, I'm hoping that we get to a place where we can all work together and peacefully figure this out. With that said, we're going to go to public comment, and I want to thank my colleagues for being here because this is not easy. They put in a full day. This is budget season. They put in a full day of meetings, and they made sure they came here. So thank you all for being here because I know you also have very challenging schedules. Our first registered speaker is Gregory Kotler. Greg? See here?
Hello?
Hey, Greg, you're on the phone, on Zoom.
Yes, I'm here via Zoom.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Please continue.
Okay, great. Greg Kotler, District 2 resident. First, I want to applaud Councilwoman Kill-Smith for calling this to our attention. I want to thank every Pittsburgher that showed up back on October 15th. Thank you all for caring. I'm here to speak against the plan proposed by the City Planning Commission. It's incomprehensible that this administration would attempt to subvert the public process as well as council oversight and approval. Planning Commission is comprised of unelected officials. Oversight by City Council is critical to maintaining transparency, accountability, and the Home Rule Charter. This is a clear disregard for protocol. We all know that there is a major homeless problem in our city. What plans are in place to provide the needed follow-up mental health and addiction care services once in our neighborhoods? Per a mayoral spokesperson, quote, there is a system of checks and balances, and changes of use of a school or nursing home must go through the zoning board, unquote. What about smaller residences? According to Olga George, the city version of the bill proposes a change that would allow for approval administratively by use of an administrator's exception. Per Jake Polak, the proposed legislation would move smaller versions of these homes containing up to 10 people from a staff level review to a by right approval. The administration refers to unnecessary barriers, but those barriers are the required transparency and oversight. This administration and its various departments and commissions has gotten its hand caught in the cookie jar one too many times for us to allow this to proceed. Public trust has been lost. We can no longer allow for change without full transparency and council approval. Per a WTA headline on October 17th, 2024, quote, the city says alarming increase in crime prompted decommissioning of the Grand Street homeless encampment, unquote. How does the city plan to manage the increase in crime once embedded within our neighborhoods? Per University of Pennsylvania study, quote, the presence of a shelter appears to cause property crime to increase by 56% within 100 meters of that shelter, with thefts from vehicles, other thefts, and vandalism driving the increase, unquote. What plans are in place to provide the public safety required for these types of facilities? Is there any guarantee that this legislation will not be used as an alternative to jail in the future? Public trust is lost and we need to be reassured. There is a lack of communication from this administration with both the public and more importantly with our elected council members. I'll offer a vote of zero confidence in this legislation proposed by the City Planning Commission. Anything that streamlines this process and removes red tape can be detrimental to our public safety and quality of life, especially from a mayoral administration that has been repeatedly caught circumventing straightforwardness. Finally, regarding this continuance, Olga George stated, quote, the administration and council will continue to engage in discussions about how to meet the housing needs of our most vulnerable residents in a way that is fair, transparent, and accountable to the public, unquote. I ask, has this administration engaged with council on this matter since October 15th, or is that another lie? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next registered speaker is Nicholas Versick. Mr. Versick.
Thanks, everyone, for the opportunity. As the City Planning Commission website clearly indicates, it's charged with guiding land use and land development within the city. The Commission makes recommendations to City Council concerning zoning ordinances. The Commission consists of 9 appointed, not elected positions, and with all due respect, the Commission has no legislative authority. They may recommend, not enact legislation. enactment of legislation is under the sole jurisdiction of City Council and the Mayor. Therefore, it should be legally mandated that all Commission proposals or suggestions be open to community notification and public process, that is, public hearings. Otherwise, proposals under consideration, if left unchallenged, could presumably create a Commission dictatorship and do away with the democratic process by effectively eliminating the voice of its citizens. Zoning regulations are primarily designed to create safe and ensure environments for our community. For the Planning Commission to waive, ignore, and circumvent zoning regulations is a deliberate action that could not only jeopardize the security of those living under these conditions, but also create potentially hazardous circumstances that could lead to dangerous and life-threatening scenarios for the entire community. By knowingly and willingly disregarding the safety requirements clearly detailed in zoning regulations, these actions may be considered as extremely negligent behavior and all that that implies, not to mention apathy toward their overall community responsibilities. It is generally recognized that a significant portion of the homeless community suffers from psychological difficulties, substance abuse problems, and frequently a combination of both. To unleash this plethora of problems generated by homeless shelters on an otherwise stable community is very unsettling and potentially catastrophic, as clearly evidenced by the disastrous circumstances now being experienced in some other major cities. Communities have been plagued with rising crime in areas where homeless shelters have been established, particularly those with a decreased police presence, at which Pittsburgh is currently experiencing. Coincidentally, the day of our last Planning Commission meeting, that was Tuesday, October the 15th, Public Safety Director Lee Schmidt said, as reported in the media, that Pittsburgh was the clear downtown homeless camp near the Fort Pitt Commons due to drug problems, all of which confirms the fears and safety concerns of city residents. In addition, a number of city school closings are currently under considerations. Communities are concerned that these closings may be used as a pretext to make homeless facilities available in more areas. The Planning Commission, working together with responsible community groups, should develop a long-term comprehensive plan to effectively deal with the homeless crisis. Following public hearings, the plan should then be submitted to City Council for consideration. This inclusive process is essential to help assure the citizens of Pittsburgh will have stability and sustainability.
Thank you, Mr. Versick. Your time's expired. If you want to leave your comments with us, with the Madam Clerk, you can leave with the clerk. Our next registered speaker is Ikahanahel Makina. Ikahanahel Makina. Is she online? She's online. Is there a mic on? Calling one last time, Ikahanahel Makina. We can come back to Ikahana. Our next registered speaker is Eileen Papali.
Hi. Many thanks to Councilwoman Teresa Kell-Smith for giving us this opportunity to be heard and not be shut out of the process. My name is Adi Papali, a decades-long 19th Ward Brookline resident, but born and raised in the Lincoln-Leamington neighborhood. I'm here to listen and learn from my fellow neighbors regarding this important issue. Government plays a role, but is not the only solution. A community-based approach is vital. Some of our neighborhoods are already very fragile and need stability. We cannot have the neighborhood tax base eroding. People will, they have, and will vote with their feet. I have lived through the ill-conceived mall disaster of East Liberty, where homes were demolished, huge chunks of street parking eliminated, and many portions became a ghost town. Government turned a deaf ear to the pleas from residents and business owners not to proceed as planned, and it has taken decades and millions to undo this tragedy. Will parking be addressed in this issue too? Remember, every space is valuable to business owners who depend on customers in and out. The director of Arcata Human Services, I heard, had mentioned that there's hundreds of beds available county-wide. Why did the city always have to be the epicenter for social experiments? Is this something only the city is supposed to adhere to and not a county-wide policy? So again, we are like the center of the donut with surrounding municipalities not having the same rules, not a level playing field. Homelessness is heartbreaking and must be addressed properly. Many are down in their luck, hardworking, and need assistance. But there is a precedence for our concern. Look no further than the Smith Mill Street, where residents restaurants, law and dental offices, and drugstores closed. California has spent over $24 billion to combat homelessness over the last 5 years, and the result is even more homelessness. Housing must be completed, coupled with treatment and getting people back into the workforce with marketable skills, staying off the streets and out of hospitals. Compassion and assistance is essential, but we need livability for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we'll go back to Ikahana Helmakina, who just walked in. Are you ready? You want to wait a minute? We'll come back to you, okay? Our next registered speaker after that is Tom Ty. Wait,
My name's Tom
please
Ty. I
continue.
live in Mount Washington. I'm a former board member of the Mount Washington Community Development Corporation and co-chaired their development committee for 7 years. I rise tonight to support City Council Bill 0701. The question is, should the City Planning Commission have unilateral authority to designate community home uses in residential zoning districts citywide? The answer is a resounding no. This is a fundamental question about our democratic rights. I spent the last 2 weeks talking to many of our community members, and they are outraged by this question. Each community elects and interacts with their district's city council representative. There are armies of volunteers in every neighborhood working to build communities that they can proudly call home. Many issues and problems arise that require community members to reach out to their city council representatives for assistance. My representative is Teresa Cale Smith. She spends countless hours attending events and meetings throughout District 2. When there is something of concern in our community, we know our council representative will listen and, if possible, address the issue. We are thankful to Councilwoman Smith for having the courtesy of informing her constituents of the legislation to be discussed here tonight. The mere thought of subverting City Council's power to approve what takes place in our community is frightening and totally undemocratic. Our whole democratic process is built around citizens electing representatives to act on their behalf in a governmental process. The City Planning Commission members are not elected and do not answer to the community. This commission wants unilateral authority to bypass City Council on these zoning changes. It will be a sad day in city government if Council permits this to happen. City Council members should be unanimous in their support of Bill 0701. Our communities depend on you to maintain our democratic rights. Please take that responsibility to heart in supporting this legislation. Thank you for your consideration of these comments.
Thank you. Thank you. And we're going to go back to Ikahana Helmakina. Ikahana Helmakina, you're next. You're next. Do you want to wait? Okay, I'll come back to you when I get to the end of the page. Mary Kozakevich, you know I can't remember your last name. I'm going to call you Smith. If I say your name wrong, please correct me when you get to the podium. Thank you, and I apologize.
It's just Kozakevich.
Kozakevich.
Drives a bridge.
Okay, thank you.
Doesn't look at all
I've
like
known
it.
her daughter since she was little. So.
Hi, I'm here just to discuss the reasons why we need to address this, because I am a longtime member. I'm a lifelong member of this community. And we need to remember that past behavior is the best indicator of future behavior. And many of the homeless are homeless because they've exhibited dangerous tendencies in the past, and many are criminally mentally ill. It may not be their fault, but it's still in existence. 2 minutes is not much time. I was under the impression I only had 2 minutes. And sometimes if you're going to say that, it's hard to be incredibly sensitive to problems. But the potential of the legislation to cut us out and cut the community council out of these choices is an utter disaster. Because we weren't asked for a focus group, we weren't asked for opinions. And as taxpayers, we don't need to roll over and play dead. The legislation originally proposed would eliminate pertinent zoning restrictions. They exist to ensure the safety of our properties and the safety of our homes, the safety of the value we have in it, and the safety of our persons. Ergo, the legislation would result in the loss of all of those. Removing restriction opens the door to potentially dangerous group homes, halfway houses, drug treatment centers. This is a residential neighborhood. Those places do not belong in residential neighborhoods. My home has been in a residential neighborhood, has been a residential home for my grandparents, my father, and myself. Transitional housing, according to National Realtors Association, can cause a 5 to 15% drop in our home values. It can also raise the crime rates by 20 to 30%, and of course it will raise our taxes because we're going to have to support additional emergency services. Because transitional housing can place mentally ill, drug dealers, addicts, and all other types of people that we really don't need in our community right directly into our backyard, because we live in a high-density area. And to even consider placing these kind of buildings is insane. Try the suburbs, where there's a little more distance between the homes. And you know what? You can think I'm insensitive, and if people do, they're welcome to buy my home. Yeah, fair market value anytime you like. And I guarantee you that most of our community agrees with that. Because remember, the future behavior is indicative on past behavior, and our safety is indicative on remaining a residential area. And thank you, Teresa, for bringing this to the front.
Thank you. I do want to thank you for your daughter's work, too. She's also created the Alicia laws to protect children from abuse. James Boland.
How you doing this evening? Thank you, Teresa, for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you.
I've lived in District 4 in the Carrick area my whole life. I was made aware of this bill the Planning Commission has put forward regarding non-housing mentally ill. I work for DPW and have cleaned up many campsites along the rivers and downtown areas. If this bill passes that you have put forward, it is a recipe for disaster. When these individuals can't get along or have an episode, they've been known to light up the other encampments on fire. When you put this in a residential community, you're putting the lives of residents and the individuals in danger of death or serious injury. I know you in the city have videos of the episodes of public nudity and a lot of worse happening downtown. So now is your answer to move it into communities that struggle to keep the quality of life acceptable for our children, family, and our neighbors. We have a shortage of police officers, and they will be stretched even thinner with the episodes that will happen when you try forcing us in our communities. Also, don't think that we don't know the NFL draft coming to our city is forcing us upon us. The NFL doesn't live here. We do. We as the taxpayers and constituents of our elected council members deserve better than this. What you're asking for us is to take away the voice we have elected to our districts. At no time, now in future, do I wish for the Planning Commission to be my voice and do as they wish without public input and public hearings to approve this item. With all that said, I hope City Council will not approve what you're proposing and vote this down. Thank you. God bless America.
Michelle Trafficant.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Michelle.
I wish to thank Councilwoman Teresa Kell Smith on her notification of this issue. Without her brave effort and long-term service to the city residents, we would not be here today. I also wish to preface my remarks by stating I in no way blame City Council for this disaster we are facing because of the county, the city administration, and the Planning Commission. The City of Pittsburgh is not responsible for community or for human services and does not have the resources to shoulder the cost. The Planning Commission's attempt to amend the city code to subject all neighborhoods to random placement of homeless shelters, halfway houses, and include those entities under the umbrella of personal care homes is an outrage. And to further decimate the neighborhoods, they suggest removing parking regulations and occupancy limits. Explain to me, how does this have a positive outcome for city residents and taxpayers? Over 40 years ago, I walked into this chamber, naive and frightened. The first question I asked was, how do you sleep at night? I am asking these entities. I don't know how you sleep at night. Furthermore, the city tax dollars that were placed on HRA and consultants under the guise of violation of the Fair Housing Act is just a falsehood, an excuse to change the code. The consultants know nothing about Pittsburgh. If they did, they would not suggest such schemes have worked in Seattle and San Diego. We are Pittsburgh, unique and proud of a city we have supported and defended. And yet, another suggestion made by the Planning Commission is to eliminate public input. Did I wake up in a dictatorship? The responsible parties need to scrap this debacle that they are trying to push onto our city council members. They need to leave this code alone, come back to the drawing board, and talk to this body. Thank you.
I don't know if I mentioned, but we're also joined by Councilman Bob Charlin. Nancy Macklin. Nancy Macklin. Is she online? Can we see? Not online. It's Nancy Macklin, last call in the audience. Okay. Fred Smith. Fred Smith. He's online?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, hi.
You hear me?
Yes. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
So, I just learned about this bill myself. I'm coming to you as a Department of Human Services worker, as a Perry Hilltop and Fineview community advocate. So ultimately, I'm hoping that we could find some ground on this bill. There's been a lot of red tape in regards to zoning for so long, right? And I don't think people look at the equity aspect of these laws that have been put in place and continue to seem to get stricter, not keeping in mind the marginalized people who's affected, and a lot of times I think we're operating off of fear. Of course, crime is inevitable, but it's not saying that just because you're going to have a group home, residential home, or whatever in your community, that it's just going to spark crime. I think that, it definitely need to be looked at, but somehow we cannot continue to restrict, make things more difficult for the at least marginalized people, to be able to find housing and living space, to not be on our streets. So that's pretty much it. I know y'all got the Allegheny County budget going on. That's a big thing. There's so much happening now that is affecting our people, and we need to really, consider our people first.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Our next registered speaker is Carmen Brown. Carmen's probably responsible for most of you being here tonight.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Carmen Brown. I'm from the East End, Homewood, East Liberty. And I'd like to read a statement that I wrote. Okay, on September 3rd, I was present at a planning hearing for the City of Pittsburgh zoning amendments. The zoning administrator, Corey Lehman, testified that the only reason for the zoning changes was because the zoning codes violated the Federal Fair Housing Act. During the hearing, there was no evidence or testimony to prove that there were violations of the fair housing laws. Out of ignorance and being ill-informed, the Planning Commission voted for these proposed amendments to move forward. A week later, it was discovered that these proposal zoning amendments were part of a bait and switch scheme by the zoning administrator. The zoning administrator gave false testimony on September 3rd. Once the commission passed the recommendation, Gainey's administration boldly admitted the real reason why he needed these zoning amendments passed was to help fast-track developers' projects to open up multiple shelters without any say-so or interference from the city residents. The Gainey administration is permitting certain developers to move forward with opening up homeless shelters without public process. There was a recent incident from an unknown pop-up shelter that is housing homeless undocumented immigrants in my community. One of the undocumented immigrants last week shot and robbed a 70-year-old man at a nursing home on Frankstown Avenue. When there is no resources, this is what happens from shelter population. The Vincentra Nursing Home displaced Black residents and replaced them with homeless and undocumented immigrants. There has been a heavy presence of police at this shelter. The developers are starting with putting these unauthorized shelters in my community because we have a weak council person, Carhart Mosley, who does not have a clue as to what's going on in all our neighborhoods. The bottom line, these zonings does not have to change. And Megan Hammond, if she's in here, who specializes in fair housing law, need to speak to the public to explain the federal laws that are not being violated. Thank you.
Thank you. Madeline McGrady.
Hello, Council. My name is Maddie McGrady. I'm with the Human Rights City Alliance, and I'm a renter in Pittsburgh's Highland Park neighborhood. Housing is a human right, and I'm here tonight to oppose the community homes bill introduced by Councilmember Cale Smith. Let me be the first in this room to clarify that community homes are not custodial care facilities, nor are they homeless shelters. They are a type of residential housing for people with disabilities. Councilmember Cale Smith, you have falsely conflated community homes with custodial care facilities and homeless shelters. They are not the same. You may have fooled many of the people in this room, but you have not fooled me. Custodial care facilities are already a conditional use subject to council approval. The fact that a custodial care facility was operated without the proper permit in no way justifies making it harder for people with disabilities to find housing through community homes. More importantly, this bill is a thinly veiled attempt to derail the Fair Housing Bill, and that is shameful. To everyone on council, you should know that human rights defenders are watching, and we will not tolerate political stunts that aim to confuse people and undermine human rights. Stop holding up the Fair Housing Bill and withdraw Bill 701. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registered speaker, we're going to go back to Ikahana Helmakina. And we'll address comments after. Okay?
Greetings. My title's Chief Ikahana Helmakina, and I wanted to thank Teresa Kell Smith personally for creating this meeting, this public forum for us to express ourselves and our concerns. We the people are asking for transparency. The people rely on you, city council members, the elected officials of this city, to make sure the public is informed and considered when transformation occurs. We are all here today because someone thought this bill would, excuse me, I cannot see. Someone thought this bill would slip through the cracks like others changes have. Boy, were you wrong. Public engagement is in the Home Rule Charter for a reason. To remind you just who you work for, the people. Unauthorized, unregulated, understaffed, and ill-equipped shelters are not able to handle the people that they have no idea that they contain. Undocumented people, as we have all seen on the news here recently, have assaulted, shot, and closely murdered someone, all in the name of a ring or a necklace. We do not want your custodial care facilities. They create a public safety issue for all of us. Haven't these developers developed our land enough? We want you to start putting people over profit. Thank you.
Thank you, Kahana. And our next registered speaker is Judy Hackle.
I didn't write anything. Hi, good evening. I'm Judy Hackle, and I live in Allentown. I am a lifelong resident there and have worked for decades to improve Allentown. I am proud to say that we won more awards in the city paper, Best of, than any other neighborhood in Allentown, and we intend to keep it going on and on till we're the very best neighborhood. Don't trust this administration. We were called on a Thursday and told that in the old St. George Convent, for all of you gray-haired people who still refer to things as what they used to be 20 years ago, they were going to put up to 100 homeless people in there on Saturday morning. Never asked anyone in the neighborhood, because I would have been the first one that got called. So be careful. We elect our councilmen so that they can help to take care of us. Bob takes care of us. He knows what it is that our neighborhood needs. I have compassion for people who do not have a home. I have gone to Auberly's campus, and I have toured and talked to homeless people in 2 of their homes. I know that they need assistance, but it needs to be for the neighborhood to decide where in this neighborhood we might be able to help this situation. It is not for the mayor to decide. I still got a minute and a half. So please support your council people. Please show up at your neighborhood meetings. This is where you find out this information. And we need this younger generation to keep on going, to keep this city strong. Another thing I noticed while we were listening to that, the pictures that we saw were on Banksville and in Mount Washington. Why is it that this side of the river doesn't get the good stuff? We get the crap. I want a mayor that knows where the South Pittsburgh is.
Doug Seminara, you have a tough act to follow. Doug Seminara. Is Doug online? No. Doug Seminara, one more time. David Brunigan. David, is he here?
Yes.
Hey, good evening.
Hi there. Sorry, I am very sick, but I thought this was important to speak. My name is Dave Bringen. I'm the Executive Director of Lawrenceville United. Our mission is to improve and protect quality of life for all Lawrenceville residents. Also a co-chair of the Pittsburgh Housing Justice Table. I'm speaking tonight to oppose Ordinance 701, which I have to say I thought was what this hearing was about, not the Fair Housing Text Amendments. So I'm going to focus my comments on Ordinance 701 that was introduced by Councilwoman Kell Smith, since I know there will be other times to speak about the fair housing legislation. This ordinance would affect Lawrenceville, as a big portion of our community is zoned residential. Put simply, I don't know why we would try to make it more difficult to provide housing for people with disabilities, which is what changing it to a conditional use will do, as they are a more burdensome process, period. I don't claim to be an expert on the Fair Housing Act, but I don't see how that's not discriminatory on its face. As a community, we've been working hard to make Lawrenceville a neighborhood that's more accommodating to people with disabilities by identifying barriers to accessibility in our public realm, creating new funding mechanisms for accessibility improvements, partnering with our neighborhood schools' special education classrooms, providing internships to young people with disabilities, pushing for universal design in our park improvements, community plans, and yes, creating housing for people with disabilities. Goodwill of Southwestern Pennsylvania, where our offices are located, services hundreds of people with disabilities, many of whom rely on community homes for housing. People with disabilities are our neighbors, and they deserve housing as much as anyone else. Community homes, as much as your house or my house or any other house in Pittsburgh, are part of our community. Most of our homes don't need council approval to have been built, all the homes that we lived in. Just to share a personal anecdote on how these are part of our community. One of my high school classmates and close friends has an intellectual disability, and in our senior year, his mother unexpectedly passed away. He came from poverty and had no other family that could provide care for him at this extreme moment. He's extremely outgoing, has many friends and social connections around our community, and he also has an amazing green thumb and would do landscaping for a variety of folks around my neighborhood. Losing his community would have been such a blow, not only to his social and economic life, but to all of us who he brought friendship and smiles and an expert green thumb when we needed it. After his mother passed, my friends and I were luckily able to find a community home, just like the one that's being regulated here, with an opening just a few blocks from his mother's home. He's lived there ever since and has thrived. He's a fixture around town. Everybody knows him as the mayor. Without that community home in his neighborhood, none of this would have been possible. He would have lost all his social connections, and we would have lost our mayor. Our planning should reflect the kinds of communities we want to build, and to me, that story is exactly the kind of community that we want to build and that I want to be a part of. We should not make outcomes like this more difficult with this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registered speaker is Alice Patton. Alice Patton. Is she online? No? I can't see. Alice Patton. Jenny Croft.
Everything's been said that I wanted to say. But I'll do it again. You know, because I worked on this today. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jenny Hammer Croft. I am a lifetime resident in the Sheridan community, a homeowner, a Democratic committee woman, and a volunteer in the community for over 50 years. I am mad. I am angry. If it wasn't for Teresa doing her job that we voted her to do this job, we would have been screwed. Thank you. Okay. And how we heard and aware of how the City of Pittsburgh Planning Commission, the Zoning Committee, was trying to pass legislation without input from the residents. Why? Why? I need answers. I absolutely oppose, as you can probably determine, the housing zoning amendment and support Teresa Kell Smith legislation to simply give the public a voice. Thank you. It's amazing. To simply give the public a voice is amazing to me, to see so many people using their voice to silence our voice. We have a mayoral election pending, and you are trying to force through a vote that could possibly change Pittsburgh, and not for the better. If you remove all obstacles from zoning, you could open our city up for more out-of-state LLS. All has happened in other cities, which can make our rents in city unaffordable for most. Who wrote this legislation? Who benefits from this? Certainly it is not for Pittsburghers. Plus, I'd like to know who you are trying to accommodate. There are plenty of public funding housing organizations out there. Who's overseeing their work? Where is this money? Why is anything accountable? Why isn't it accountable? I just need answers, and nobody wants to give me an answer. Nobody. It's disappointing. We, the residents, especially of the west end of Pittsburgh, had enough. When the rights of homeowners who invested in the community like I did for 50 years, raised my family here. And you know what? When they graduated college, married, I was so grateful that they moved out of the city of Pittsburgh, because I knew this is where it was going. Oh, am I up? Oh.
Your time is up, Jenny.
And lastly, I think it's...
Sometimes 3 minutes seems awfully long.
Okay, I'll stop.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you. Chief Poma Chakmam Yahali.
Namachak Alakaing, the light of me honors the light and all of you here tonight. First, I'd like to say thank you, Teresa, for bringing this to the light, for sunshine is the best disinfectant. I was at the disgrace zoning hearing, which the commission voted for. I'll remind you, we are Indians not taxed, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the United States Constitution. The Commission and Zoning Committee are not a federal legislative body, nor is the Planning Commission. We do not give our consent for this. You council members are bound by your oath of office, as your mayor is as well, who admittedly knows nothing about the Constitution. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, and excluding Indians not taxed is clear as it relates to our lands. I inform you that zoning codes are not laws over the Constitution, nor are treaties. The Delaware Treaty is very clear. The United States did engage to guarantee our people and our heirs that all of our territorial rights in the fullest and most ample manner, and are bound by our treaties, that we will stand side by side in friendship. The Northwest Ordinance was also very clear that the utmost good faith must always be observed to our people, and that our lands and property should never and shall never be taken from us without our consent, nor our property rights or our liberties. And free, prior, informed consent is the right of our people to give or withhold consent to projects that may affect our territories or rights. It's a process that involves consultation, dialogue, and negotiations between a project developer and our people, or any people affected by the project. Free, prior, informed consent is recognized in the United Nations on the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, which the United States has adopted, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and International Labor Organization Convention 169. And here are some elements. Free means consent is given voluntarily, without coercion, intimidation, or manipulation. Prior, consent is sought sufficiently. Informed, information is provided. Withdrawal, consent can be withdrawn at any stage. And these ensures that our people are consulted and can negotiate the conditions of anything, any project, or anything such as these zoning codes that we're talking about here tonight. It's designed to establish a bottom-up participation and consultation before development begins. Honor your oath to the Constitution, all of you, and respect Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, and excluding Indians not taxed. I yield.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. I'm just going to ask, you're entitled to say what you want to say, but I'm going to ask for people to please be respectful when you come. My colleagues are here late. The mayor's office isn't even here to defend himself, so I'm just going to ask you to please keep your comments to the actual bills. Thank you. Amy Zayas.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Amy Zayas. Okay, I guess I'll begin. So good evening. My name is Amy Zayas. I've met many of you before. I'm no stranger to this venue here. Anyways, I am a new homeowner in Beachview. Very excited to be able to say that. And I'm here because I want to urge you in the strongest way possible to reject the ordinance of 0701 and instead improve the proposed fair housing amendments that have been recommended already by the Planning Commission. I will add, Teresa, I do live very close to your district and actually very close to the Marion Manor facility, and I actually advocate its reuse as a group home. I think that's a great reuse for the facility. Anyways, this ordinance 0701 is just bad policy. Permitting the building of group homes at the discretion of City Council is not only wasteful, as I assume you all have better things to do, but also will functionally make these types of supportive homes more difficult to build. This will ultimately embolden the not in my backyard crowd here, which I'm frankly disappointed to see. And
please keep your comments to council.
I think this is related to the issue. Anyways, I think that we will end up punishing those in our community who are the most needy. This will lead to worse outcomes and growing disparity. Because if this goes through, should any projects pass council, they're most likely to be built in the poorest neighborhoods where constituents don't have the luxury and time to speak up on the matter. And we should all acknowledge that we are all privileged to be here tonight. We all have families, a lot of people have jobs, works to do. And it's been well proven time and again that most public input is not representative of the actual local population. I would also say if there's concern about safety, that those concerns are legitimate and they should be addressed. But blocking new development doesn't fix the problem. Why not work to make these places safer instead of placing them under onerous discretionary review, a process that will ultimately kill many projects before they even get started? We should be welcoming our new neighbors, and particularly those with disabilities and special needs. I'm running out of time, but I'll mention that I met Alicia Romano, the Director of Community Human Services recently, and she spoke about the positive impact that the fair housing legislation would have on their work, which is so critical to our region. I think about the recently opened bridge housing in Stanton Heights and the fact that even our mayor said yesterday that we need more bridge housing. We have a bottleneck in our city. We have emergency beds, but we don't have bridge housing.
Thank you.
Anyways, thank you.
Our next registered speaker is Judy Hackle. Is there another Judy Hackle?
No, she's gone.
Okay. I thought maybe it was her daughter. Nicholas Rizio?
All right, good evening, members of council, and thank you for your patience. My name is Nick Rizio. I'm a resident of downtown Pittsburgh. I am speaking tonight on behalf of Pro Housing Pittsburgh, an organization that advocates for housing abundance and affordability in our great city. We are a group of hundreds of renters and homeowners who work with local leaders and community groups to make it easier to build housing in Pittsburgh. We need to build housing in Pittsburgh for many reasons. First and foremost, Pittsburgh has seen a huge increase in prices over the last few years. Our rent increases have been some of the highest in the nation, with rental costs nearly over 40% where they were pre-pandemic. High rents and high home prices are incredibly problematic for a region, and especially for vulnerable populations in a region. When rents are high, the people with the lowest incomes will be harmed the most. We have all seen homelessness increase in the city over the past few years. Many people blame this on factors such as the opioid crisis, but the reality is that homelessness is the direct result of high housing costs. When housing costs rise, more people become housing insecure and more people fall into situations where they no longer have housing. Pro-Housing Pittsburgh strongly opposes tonight's proposed legislation, Ordinance 0701, which will require a conditional use approval hearing for community homes to open up in residential districts within our city. In light of the rising homelessness and worsening unaffordability of housing in our city, we categorically oppose the use of discretionary approvals that add unnecessary delay, uncertainty, and expense to opening services that are desperately needed in the city of Pittsburgh. Without community homes, the least fortunate among us will needlessly suffer. We urge the city to ensure that new housing can be developed easily and predictably. The strongest predictor of homelessness is housing costs, and the only way to reduce housing costs is to build more housing. This year alone, we have witnessed intense backlash against proposed affordable housing, market rate housing, supportive services, and homeless people in general. The current situation is untenable. We must take affirmative steps to make housing more affordable to all. And for all of those reasons, we urge City Council to vote against Ordinance 0701. Thank you for your time.
Next registered speaker is Joseph LaSorsa. Joseph? Is he online? Nope. Keith Brucha? No. Keith? No. Virginia Flaherty? She's online. Virginia Flaherty?
Yes. Yes. Good evening, council members. My name is Virginia Flaherty, and I live in the neighborhood of Shadyside in the city of Pittsburgh. I love living in this city, but it always seems my neighbors and I have to constantly fight to preserve our neighborhoods. We expect our elected officials to give us a good quality of life in the city for our tax dollars. So I want to applaud and sincerely thank Council President Emeritus Teresa Cale Smith for reacting to a group home situation in her area that her constituents were upset about. She truly is a true public servant. So she came up with a bill that would change the decision of proposed group homes in our communities from the zoning board to city council. Even though there wasn't a problem with the zoning board. It's this fair housing bill that's trying to confuse everything. But the only problem with the council versus the zoning board is the zoning board gives you a right of appeal. And please correct me if I am wrong, but I didn't think that council has a right of appeal if a neighborhood isn't happy with a decision. If a decision is made to put a homeless group in our neighborhood, the zoning board would give the neighbors a full hearing, as they always did, without any of the mayor's or the fair billings changes, that is. And if we would be in agreement with the decision, great. If we're not, again, I like having the right to appeal. If we empower city council to take on these decisions, and if they decide something we don't like, it would be a final decision. Again, if I'm wrong with that, please correct me. That we would not have a right to appeal. So the city taxpayer, and I agree with the last speaker, we're like the epicenter. We get pushed to our limits. We carry the tax burden of all the tax land for the stadiums, hospitals, universities, and cultural events for the whole region. We are now expected to start chopping our housing stock to create more housing in order to have more affordable housing. We are now saddled with making decisions about having group homes and homeless in our neighborhood. I would much rather have the city council getting the suburbs to share this responsibility with the areas like Mont Lebanon, Aspinwall, and Sewickley, and to leave the hearings to the zoning board as is, along with our council members' approval, because the council members are wonderful with working with support in front of the zoning board. And for God's sake, strike down this preposterous fair housing bill. It's unconscionable for the mayor to try to streamline such a non-transparent amendment through his 9-member unelected.
Thank you for your comments. Next registered speaker is Mallory Brannigan. Hi.
Hi, my name is Mallory Brannigan and I live in Lawrenceville. I'm here to speak in opposition to the proposed bill by the councilwoman on the grounds that it is discriminatory to people with disabilities and it is in violation of existing federal law. I am here because I read the mailer from October 2nd sent out by Councilperson Cale Smith. In the letter, the councilperson misrepresents the Fair Housing Bill and uses deeply ingrained, tired fear-mongering against unhoused folks to pit neighbor against neighbor. The amendment proposed by Councilperson Cale Smith does not affect the zoning for homeless shelters. The amendment makes it more difficult to make 8-person group homes for people with disabilities. This amendment is hateful, it's unchristian, and it violates the 1988 Fair Housing Act. It's my understanding that the council at this time is not interested in passing the proposed Fair Housing Bill. You don't think we need it, and yet study after study that we pay for reveals that certain vulnerable populations continue to have measurable difficulty accessing housing in Pittsburgh. The Fair Housing Bill is an informed attempt to bring the city closer to compliance with federal law. This is your chance to not only do the right thing, but also save the city the cost of defending discrimination lawsuits. Pittsburgh can be a home for everyone. Don't make it harder for disabled people to access housing. Housing is a human right. Councilperson Cale Smith, please withdraw your amendment. Please pass the much-needed Fair Housing Bill.
Our next registered speaker is John Rhodes.
Hi, thank you. My name is John Rhodes. I live in the Polish Hill neighborhood. I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh. I've worked with and lived beside the people who would have a harder time finding a home if this legislation passes. I believe in removing barriers to making sure our city is a place that is welcoming to all people, especially people living with disabilities. Since I was in high school, I have volunteered to work with people with disabilities, and I want to make my city a place where they feel welcome. I want our city to be like America, a community that is stronger because of our ability to provide a home to anyone wanting a better life. Just like it says at the feet of the Statue of Liberty, give us your tired, your weary. Pittsburgh is a city of strength. We don't have to be afraid of people. We can embrace them and lift them up. That's the city I was born in and the city I want to continue to live in. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next registered speaker is Bernadette Mosey. Bernadette? I see you. Take your time.
Hi, I'm Bernadette. I'm from Beachview. I like certain aspects of 701, I'll call it, and I like certain aspects of the fair housing. I think everyone needs to come to the drawing board. I did intake for outpatient mental health and drug and alcohol for 17 years. I see what happens. On many of the Facebook pages, you have people up in arms. They are so angry with the homeless. But if you leave it up to the communities, they're going to say no. And I'm sorry, but Marion Manor would have been a perfect place to help the people.
Okay.
But
Okay,
they
please.
could be. Shut up.
Okay, that's enough. Please address the council. Members in the audience, please give the person speaking a chance to speak. Go ahead. I
They could be
apologize.
run. We had satellite offices. You could have required policing in these facilities. You could have required, like the old Beachview Rec Center. You could have it where they have classes that they have to take, you have UPMC that doesn't pay any taxes. Let them fill it with doctors and mental health teams. You can have these things work, these places work for these people. Noah was a drunk. Jesus was homeless, and so was John the Baptist. Scrap 701, scrap the fair housing, come together at the table and look at what we have in Pittsburgh that can make these places work. Drug and alcohol is usually, they're trying to hide something. They're trying to self-medicate because they don't have the ability to go and get the help. Putting them out to the suburbs, really? They have all the facilities out there already. You have Auberly. You have all the Spectrum schools that are out there that the city of Pittsburgh is busing the kids out to. Please come together and find a better way and make UPMC do something to help.
And then thank you, Bernadette. Our next registered speaker is Deborah Lynn Terzak. Deborah Lynn, oh, sorry.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name's Deborah Terzak. I'm the Block Watch captain, one of the Block Watch captains from Brookline. And I wanted to say that everything that I wanted to say has pretty much been said. And I'm going to reference Greg Kotler, and I think he and I were very well aligned on our opinions. But in summary, Teresa, my block, we request that all zoning changes in residential areas continue to require the approval of City Council after public hearings. We've had quite a few surprises over the several years I've been here in the Pittsburgh area. I'm not quite sure how well our existing zoning laws are working as far as notification. But I think that we can all say if we have some prior notice to a potential change, it gives us the ability to better plan and to coordinate whatever required changes are needed. I think at the end of the day, we all know that we're facing a crisis here in the United States with homeless for a lot of reasons. And I'm not quite sure what you all know about the numbers you're expecting to come in here. I personally share my time. I travel all over the world, and I have for the last 45 years. So I'm going to ask you all, and I am willing to give my time to you to take a look at how some other countries have handled homelessness, specifically Japan, which is great, Finland, which is right on up there, in Germany, where I spend a lot of my time. We've had a significant crisis in 2014, 2015 with the migration of our Syrians that came in there to refugees. We did a really bad job of planning to get them in there and accepted into the community, and we're paying the price for it now. But anyway, I think we need to take a look outside. Some of my colleagues here were saying we need to work together. I agree with you. At the same time, my community is fearful because we've been a lot, and thanks to Mr. Coghill here, he's gotten us through a lot of bad situations already before this the new influx coming in. And I really believe that we just have to deal with this, everybody, because it's here due to our, well,
Okay,
maybe
okay.
you don't, but I'm going to. Okay, so I'm here to offer any assistance you might need.
Whoever's speaking here,
Well,
if you continue to interrupt the meeting, it's considered a misdemeanor offense, you will be escorted out of here.
okay. Well, anyway, this girl's not fearful, but anyway, just let's all work together. Okay. Thank you very much. So, Teresa, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say. Okay.
Thank you. Diana Dugina. Diana Dugina, did I say that correctly? Is she online? No. Diana Dugina, D-U-G-I-N-A. Okay, the next speaker, George Galovich. George Galovich. George Galovich, last time. Susan Berardini. Susan Berardini. Susan Pittman. Stephen D. Crocco. How do you say it? That's what I said, Crocco, okay. Not here. Jamie Marie Christian. I don't think I saw her either. Sorry. Steve DeCrocco, say it again. Steve DeCrocco, one more time.
Hi, I'm on Zoom.
Tell me your name. Jamie.
Hi, Jamie Marie Christian.
I can hear your voice.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize that I can't be there in person. It's my birthday tomorrow, so I'm actually out for birthday this evening. But I did want to speak because after speaking with you last week and finding out about the rape that occurred at that hotel that was converted into a home for the unhoused, which I think is an admirable thing to do. However, the lack of communication to the community members and the process that is being taken is quite concerning. As you know, Councilperson Kelsnett, I am looking to build a farm not far from that location. In fact, it's, I think, less than 2 football fields away. And as a single woman and a single mother, and one of my kids, I'm their only parent, it really concerns me that I would be in an area where there are individuals who are experiencing extreme mental health issues who could potentially harm me, my children, or those who would be volunteering at our site. My office is, I'm also the executive director of an organization called Let Us Turn Up the Sustainability Collective. We work in food access, and our office is in Carrick in District 4. And I'm sure many of you know that there is a lot of folks in the Carrick area who are experiencing mental health issues. There are 2 halfway houses directly behind me and a crack house directly in front of my office. So I invite those folks from Highland Park and Lawrenceville and all the other communities that are not impacted at this time by the unhoused individual issue or the mental health crisis to come visit my office once or twice a week and see somebody have a mental breakdown or threaten you. In 2016, I was threatened by a neighbor who is currently unhoused. I do have the ability to know where he is at all times, but there's a chance he could end up in a vacant building that gets transformed, say on Brownsville Road, where there's more vacant buildings than any other place in Pittsburgh besides possibly Manchester and Homewood. He could possibly end up there. He was based in, his family is in the South Hills, so there's a very good chance that he could be just a few blocks away from me. And this is a man who threatened my life. I can't tell you how unnerving this is as a business leader and somebody who is trying to improve the economy in South Pittsburgh area. And I can tell you that South Pittsburgh gets dumped on. There is very little chance for economic mobility, and this will hinder it even further. I not only run a nonprofit, but I do have a for-profit business on site. And in Carrick, the 2 blocks where my organization is located and where my for-profit business will be opening, there has been more development in the past 2 years than any other part of Carrick. And if you
Thank you. And Kristen Poma Kayla? Did I say that correct? Poma Kayla? Kristen Poma Kayla? No, and then I'm going to spell this out. Do you know how to say this? I don't want to mispronounce it. Okay, you want to say it in the mic?
She's online. I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing it. She's number 30.
It's okay. And like Alakin, that's Proto-Mayan for delighting me, honors delighting you. My Aborigine American title is Yahalahi Chanal Ka'in. I am Indians not taxed. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, and excluding Indians not taxed. In the Bouvier Dictionary, it states Indians, the Aborigines of this country, are so called. I am located within the Delaware Territory. As you all recall, Pittsburgh. I invoke my people's constitutional indigenous rights. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, and excluding Indians not taxed. So, City Council, are you going to honor your oath to the Constitution? We, the Aborigine Americans, do not give our consent on this matter today, because prior to your Aegistisca immigrant ancestors' invasion of our ancestral lands, prior to the colonization, prior to industrialism, prior to forced assimilation, unlawful tax, and pollution, overall the destruction of our lands, prior to your ill-conceived policies and codes against my people's constitutional indigenous rights, and to our natural resources for our basic needs of living, that includes healthy environments, land structures, and land fixtures, including food forestries. It is now time to change and choose something better, which is in your laws, within your government's laws, actually, that you are bound to follow, City Council. When it comes to discrimination, it does include ancestry. My people have constitutional indigenous rights, especially to belong, as in the ADRIP, the American Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. No discrimination of any kind may arise from the exercise of such a right. Aborigine Americans have the right to our lands, territories, use, to develop, to control our resources, which we have traditionally controlled, occupied, or otherwise acquired. And as for the UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Aborigine Americans have the right to live freely, be safe and secure, and to not be exposed to violence. That includes nefarious crimes of genocide that your citizens have been committing against my people, amongst other nefarious actions. A lack of concern is a lack of action. You have not been in communication with the Aborigine American community. It is imperative to honor your oath to the Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, and excluding Indians not taxed, and acknowledge and implement the action of a government-to-government relationship. As such, House Congress Resolution 331. Honor your oath to the Constitution. Create, restore our lands, and make these lands healthy and a safer environment for all. Since you are here, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Luce. Carol Luce. And our next speaker after her is Elizabeth Bream. Carol Luce. She's not here. Elizabeth Bream. Elizabeth Beam. No?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yep, now I can. Thank you.
Hi, yeah. This is Elizabeth Beam. I live in the Bloomfield neighborhood, and I am here today to speak to you council members to oppose Bill 0701. I do believe that this is simply another barrier to creating more options for housing in the Pittsburgh region. And for that reason, I will beg you to not approve this bill. and instead try to revisit the fair housing and some dramatic zoning changes for the Pittsburgh region so that we might have more housing. I am a provider in one of our local emergency departments, and since I am in the emergency department, I'm often face to face with those who are struggling with their inability to find housing, often contributing to their physical and or mental health crises, whichever came first, their illness or their housing. That does not matter in this instance. It would contribute to their well-being and the well-being of all Pittsburghers if there was more housing available. Please do not instate any further barriers. Another level of process is simply another barrier. Thank you.
Thank you. Cindy Opakunis? Cindy? Any Cindy's? No. Deborah Wiley? Deborah Wiley. She online?
Yes, I'm online.
Hi.
Okay, I'm speaking on behalf of myself as a 30-year resident of Pittsburgh's District 2 in Banksville, and my wife, a lifelong Pittsburgh resident and retired City of Pittsburgh police officer. We're dumbfounded by legislation the City Planning Commission's recently approved. Legislation that would allow the Department of City Planning to approve introduction of homeless shelters into our neighborhood by waiving any zoning regulations it deems necessary, without so much as community notification or public process. How can the Planning Commission, in good faith, require that entrepreneurs, businesses, and residents adhere to zoning regulations when they would just wave a wand to permit homeless shelters in our neighborhoods? City residents see homeless people all day long, causing havoc, scaring people on city streets, camping out and panhandling. While there are surely earnest people involved, and I'm not talking about disabled people and fair housing issues, most reports about our city's homeless population cite violence, alcohol and drug abuse, and sexual trafficking. It's come to the point where encampments are removed from city spaces because of these actual dangers. Dangers that you would relocate to our residential neighborhood. To be sure, we too feel unsafe walking or biking along the rivers or the jail trail or the trail from the Heinz Lofts to the stadiums, so we do these things in the suburbs. Countless people have told us they won't come back to the city because of the danger posed by homelessness on our downtown streets and green spaces. Like our City of Pittsburgh police officers, firefighters, and teachers, they've moved to the suburbs. They shop in the suburbs. They pay taxes in the suburbs. Yet Mayor Gainey and Allegheny County Executive Sarah Innamorato and the City Planning Commission choose to relocate these downtown dangers and have us feel unsafe in our own neighborhood. We voted for you, Gainey and Innamorato. We did not vote to relocate homeless from downtown to our backyards. And as Democrats, we assure you that we're not alone in telling you that this is the straw that breaks the camel's back. Bring a homeless shelter into our neighborhood, put our safe neighborhood at risk, one that's not patrolled by city police officers because the police department is understaffed, destroy our home's value, a home we've worked very hard for. After 30 years of paying city wage taxes, double and triple what's levied in neighboring towns and counties, and know that we will work very hard to assure neither of you will be reelected. So essentially, people and especially City Council President Teresa Kell Smith, for all of your help in District 2 and for this common sense bill that City Council members should unanimously approve, and for the opportunity to express our opinion, one that the Planning Commission would silence. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Our next registered speaker is Jan Hanrahan. I said that wrong. Hanrahan? Hanrahan, how do you say it?
John Hanrahan. Close enough. John Hanrahan. Hard
Hanrahan.
Irish name, I know.
Yeah. I'm going to give you a name like
that is my
Smith.
name. I'm John Hanrahan. I am a homeowner and a proud resident of the North Side in District 1. I'm vice president of the Fine View Citizens Council, but speaking on my own behalf tonight. I had a nice phone call with my sister the other day. She is a QIDP, a qualified intellectual disability professional. She serves and works with clients who have autism, Down syndrome, etc. And her clients live together in what we would call here in Pittsburgh community homes, the subject of Bill 701, which I'm going to talk about tonight. So I told my sister, when I talked to her on the phone, I told her about this bill, about 701. She does not think very highly of this bill. And she immediately brought up first the Americans with Disabilities Act and its integration mandate, which the Department of Justice enforces. She also told me about the Home and Community-Based Services Settings Rule, a federal rule that guarantees, among other things, the right, a disabled person's right to integrated living. And naturally, I also brought up in this conversation the Fair Housing Act as amended in 1988, which again bars discrimination against disabled people in housing. So, we talked about policy, but my sister also told me this story about a house that some of her clients had recently moved into. It's a plain old house in a plain old subdivision. She showed me a picture, and it is the definition of nondescript and unremarkable. It's nothing special. The clients that moved there came from a much more secluded home. They had been segregated, and now they were integrated. This changed them. Their behaviors improved. They got along better with their housemates and with their service providers. They were happier in their new home, in their new integrated neighborhood home. So I mentioned the FHA, the ADA, the HCBS, but let's be real. I can't stand here and say that this Bill 701 is legal or illegal. What I can say, what I know without a doubt, is that this bill, Bill 701, would make it harder for disabled Pittsburghers to find that same happiness in housing. Is Bill 701, does it violate federal law? I don't know. What I do know is that this bill is mean. It's wrong. You should not pass it.
Our next speaker is Marcia Bandis.
Marcia. Thank you.
Thank
my
you.
name is Marcia Bandies. First, let me say that I do not have a deep understanding of the Fair Housing Bill that the administration is attempting to pass. But what I will say is that most of the talk I've heard tonight is fear-mongering about that bill, not about 701. I think that this is what part of the problem is here. You keep talking about homeless people that are going to come in and beat and kill and attack. That is not what a community home is by definition, unless that housing bill plan has changed the definition. And if it has, then I would suggest that the council have the strength to take the Gainey administration to the table and solve that problem, not the problem of community homes. I think this is so wrong. Anyways, to redefine. What that said, I oppose Bill 0701, which focuses on making it more difficult for community homes. There's enough fear-mongering. We're talking about community homes. We're pitting one against another with this homeless people that you keep raving about. And anyways, we are talking about community homes, housing for the disabled people who need time to get their lives in order. It's wrong to make it more difficult. Do we wish them to be homeless, living on the streets? Because if we don't have a homeless community a community home for them to go to, then that's where they're going to end up, is on the streets. So stop and consider, with a twist of fate, it could be you looking for a community home. Many of us have had times in our lives when we were down and out, and I just think that it's wrong for us now to try to kick these folks to the curb. It's wrong. I fully agree with
with the woman that spoke over here about trying to get together and to resolve these issues. And I think the issues have to be resolved with the fair housing plan that they're working on, not on this. I hope that your bill can be set aside. I hope that this bill, it will not be needed, because community housing is not about bringing in a bunch of weird people from housing that I shouldn't use the word weird, desperate people who have not got the supervision that they need, but rather disabled people who are coming out of hospitals and institutions. And with that, I guess I will have said enough. Thank you.
Debbie Enon. Debbie Enon. Thomas Shane Buckley. Tom Buckley. I have two, Tom Buckley and Tom Shane. Tom Buckley, is he online?
Hello, how you doing?
Hi, Tom.
Hi, I'm online. This is Tom Buckley. I'm a retired public safety employee. I am also a homeowner and reside in the Elliott West End neighborhood of Pittsburgh. And I want to first thank you, not so much for this proposal, but for the fact that you are bringing this issue to light. I normally would not be in favor of a code enforcement change, especially being in a history with public safety, but I understand your purpose and the need to address the subject at hand. And we are conflating two different things. I don't believe any speaker tonight is against the greater access of housing, including affordable homes. But this is becoming a corporate for-profit situation, in my opinion, and the county should bear the responsibility of most of this. I'd like to speak a little bit about District 2, namely the West End Elliott neighborhood, which, if you've ever heard of the Pittsburgh neighborhood projects, they have a mission statement that says, through education and exposure, the ultimate goal of the Pittsburgh neighborhood project is to inspire residents, practitioners, policymakers to come together and address the causes and consequences of segregation, the deindustrialization and the de-investment by bringing attention to equity, investment policies and programs to our neighborhoods and to the people who have been left behind. Residents in our high-need communities should always be part of the decision-making process to address the challenges they, in their neighborhoods, will experience and in the broader investment decisions. That's first and foremost. If you haven't heard of the Pittsburgh project, a gentleman named Nick Cotter, who's a product of our own Carrick neighborhood, a graduate of Wheeling Jesuit University and Hines College Information Systems and Public Policy of Carnegie Mellon. He is also a data analyst with the Allegheny County's Department of Human Services. And he uses his experiences and his research to put together this page that I highly, highly encourage you members of council to go to that website and learn about the communities and their struggles. This guy did all your homework for you. The webpage is pittsburghneighborhoodsprojects.blog. All right, a few of the things about the West End.
Thanks, Tom. Barbara Jo Ernsberger. I don't think she's here. Is she online? Not online. Tammy Foley.
Hello, my name is Tammy Foley. I said I was speaking tonight because I did not know how many people would come and speak, being that it was late night and thunderstorms coming in. So I want to thank you, Teresa, because you have my utmost respect and what you did for the community where I live in the Banksville area, to let us know what was going on in our neighborhood was amazing. And you will have my vote always, along with many of my neighbors.
You don't have to worry about that, okay?
Yeah, many of my neighbors feel that for the council people who are standing up for us. So thank you all. I'm here because, like many people have been saying, I believe in Pittsburgh. I've been a Pittsburgh resident since I was born. I've lived in 3 different areas in the city. I lived in the Greenfield area. I moved to the North Side area and lived right on the verge of Ross Township, so I was right out there on Old Ivory Avenue, off Old Ivory Avenue, and now I am in the Banksville area. So I lived in all 3 of the areas around the city and understand what it's about. What I will say is I work hard for my money. I selected the area to which I'm in so that I could live in an area and have a voice here in the city. My brother, for the people here who think we're against having homeless or disability people in the area, my brother is a disabled person, and I have to live in the city because he is a disabled person. He is a laborer. He's the only one who is not permitted to move out of the city. So I'm forced to stay here and not move into an area where I could have a bigger home for less money and less taxes, and I stay in the city to take care of my brother. I do not want Marion Manor to turn into a homeless shelter. I am here to say no. I am a stone throw away. My mother was at there and just recently passed away in that place. I do not want a homeless shelter or the disabled that are on the streets of our city to move into that area. And I want to have the voice. I don't want the zoning committee to come in here and say, you can slide this in and put somebody in my neighborhood that I don't want there. I have the right. I voted here. I pay taxes here. And I have the right to say yes and no. And so does everyone else in the city. Please oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you. Robin Gensel? Robin Gensel. I didn't see her. Robin? Do you see her, Susan? No. Kirk Shimp? Kirk Shimp. Hi.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Kirk Shimp, and I have been a Proud City resident for over 20 years. I even own my own home in Brookline. I have spent 10 years with Public Works, and personally, I have seen how the homeless live. Our division would go and clean up the homeless camps over, say for instance, off of Carson Street. We would go in there and the city would provide porta potties for them, and there would be just urine and feces everywhere. They live like pigs. I don't want that in my neighborhood. The drug use that they just, it's foul. I'm sorry, I'm just angry because the drug use is out of control. Now I work for a different company and off of Howard Street, and there's nothing but homeless around. I get it, people are down on their luck, I get that. But the drug use that goes on, I've personally have called 911 to help these people, just to find out that they have overdose on the road. There was one incident I saw earlier this year, was right by a children's facility, a daycare, was a man urinating on the sidewalk. I've seen homeless people defecating on the road. I don't want that in my neighborhood. My family lives here in Pittsburgh. I'm raising a family here. I don't want this in my neighborhood. I live in Brookline, like I said, and we don't want this. I don't think anybody wants this. I get it if you're disabled and you have mental, mental health, if you have, you want to say, autism, however, I get that. But I'm talking about the people that are on the streets. The people I've encountered over the years, it's not going to be good for the city at all. I really ask you guys to not do this, because myself, I will leave. Everybody I know will leave the city. I don't care. I'll foreclose on my house if I have to, just to get out of the city, because you're not going to lower my property the way it is, because I work hard every day. And you guys are not going to bring these people into my neighborhood, because at the end of the day, my family is all that matters in this life, and I'll do whatever I can to protect them. So please do not let this pass. And if you want that in your neighborhood, go ahead, let them live with you, but don't live by me. Thank you.
John Norbert. Our next registered speaker is John Norbert. The next one after that is Linda Woods. John Norbert. Is Mr. Norbert here? Did he leave? Linda Woods. Venicia C. Dunn. I'm not sure if I said that right. Oh, wait, Linda Woods is on. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Linda Woods. Linda Woods. Is she okay? Okay. Okay, yes, please continue. Is she good?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can. Please continue.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
I'm actually calling from my car. I've been listening while my son is at karate. I wanted to just participate in the meeting because I feel like there are a lot of unanswered questions. I agree with a lot of the callers that if this is a situation for homeless, housing of the homeless, I think that it's important to note that not every homeless person wants to be housed. That's right. I think it's important to note that you can't help someone just by giving them a house. I have questions about how these community homes, if they are for the homeless, are going to be run. Who's responsible? Who's paying the bill? Who is going to be responsible if this residence becomes derelict? Who's going to be checking the codes? Who's going to be in charge of these things? Also, changing the residency from 8 to 10 and changing the staff ratio, I would think that there would be, is that something that is okay? Like with patients, there's a ratio. In daycare settings, there's a ratio. So what does that look like safety protocol wise? Also, what's the saturation rate of these community homes? How many of these are going to go into each neighborhood? Some neighborhoods have more housing stock and large buildings available for these when other neighborhoods do not. So what's the plan for the Planning Commission? What's going on with that? Where's the transparency? I've been having such a hard time finding the information just to be able to speak on this and ask questions. I do not want to not have the opportunity to speak out as a homeowner, someone who's invested in my community and who's a longtime resident of my community. And I think that we all want to help the homeless. Our family has volunteered at Light of Life many times, and I wonder how many people, have really interacted with the homeless, and how many and realize that sometimes a shelter, even though Light of Life is highly reputable, but some of the shelters are not so. And some of the shelters become more dangerous than actually being out on the street, and that's why some of the people prefer to be there. So again, who's responsible? Where's the transparency in all this? Where's the proposal for all these things, that the Planning Commission is coming up with? And, I would love to help the homeless. And I hear things about disabled clients. Who is actually being put into these homes is another question, so for residents, I feel like there's a lot of questions. And I feel like for people who are investing in their communities, who are longtime residents of their communities, they have a lot of questions and concerns. It's not mean to have.
Thank you. And our next registered speaker is Venicia C. Dunn. Venicia C. Dunn, is she online? No? Vlad Kaploon.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes. Thanks for holding on so long.
Oh yeah. Well, it's been a journey. My name is Vlad Kaplan. I live in East Liberty. I'm here to urge City Council to reject Ordinance 0701 which will make it harder to create housing for disabled folks. The presentation at the beginning of this meeting indicated that the conditional use exception requires 2 meetings instead of 1, lengthening the process to provide housing to disabled people and adding red tape. The presentation mainly seemed to talk about the Fair Housing Bill and not the bill proposed here today, and I don't quite understand why concerns raised in the presentation aren't being worked on while considering the other bill. The issue with the unlicensed facility mentioned in the presentation is an issue of enforcement, and this ordinance doesn't fix it, and the Fair Housing Bill does not allow it. In general, I think we should be trying our best to eliminate discretionary decision-making from our housing laws. Administrator approval is better than special exception, and special exception is better than conditional use. We should be making it easier to house people, not harder. We need to write good laws and trust our professionals to administer them, rather than making every decision a political event. Allowing for discretionary decision-making based on the community engagement process encourages selfish behavior that acts against the best interests of the city at large. There are parents who don't think they need to vaccinate their kids since all the other parents are going to vaccinate theirs. And what I've experienced in attending the various council, planning, and zoning meetings is that every block in the city is full of people who behave like those parents. If everyone behaves this way, we're inviting a California-level housing and homelessness crisis. We need a uniform way to make decisions across the city with as much by right approval as possible. Any community engagement process we have must take into consideration the needs of the city and not just the people on the block. This bill not only attempts to move Pittsburgh in the wrong direction, but also obstructs getting to the real business of considering the Fair Housing Amendment legislation, which would make our housing policy less discretionary rather than more. There's a lot of stuff in the Fair Housing Bill, and I don't pretend to know all of it. Maybe some stuff in there will need to be changed, but I did see some good stuff in there, including the removal of policies that are discriminatory against students, and the empowerment of churches to expand the sanctuary services that they can offer. We need to move on to discussing that bill instead of this one. I very much agree with the comments made by Marcia and Bernadette. There's a lot of fear-mongering going on that I'm not sure reflects the text of the Fair Housing Bill, and in any case, that we should be discussing that when we're discussing that bill. Again, I urge council to reject this proposal as quickly as possible and move on to business that actually helps our city. Thank you. Go Pittsburgh, go Pens.
Thank you. Vadim Tanajan. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Online?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So thank you for offering me the opportunity to speak. My name is Vadim Tanagan. I'm a resident and homeowner of Lawrenceville, and I'd like to speak out against Ordinance 701. And I'd like to offer a short story about a disabled friend who would be directly impacted by the proposed legislation. I have a very good friend named Bryn. She's a born and raised Pittsburgh local and has spent most of her 30 years here. Bryn is disabled and on limited SSDI income and assets. Because of her limited income and unique needs relevant to her disability, Bryn has struggled to find good quality affordable housing. After a long search, just recently, she had an opportunity to live with 4 other people in a shared home in Garfield, people she trusted in a location close enough to a grocer and other services she needed at a split rent that was just affordable enough. That deal fell through at the last minute, and now she has to search again, and it may take possibly months until she can find another situation that is as ideal. Bryn is an incredibly kind, generous, and wonderfully creative person who has spent so much time and energy just trying to meet her basic human needs for shelter. And as a reminder, she's a lifelong Pittsburgh resident and as much of a part of the community as anyone. We should be making it easier, not harder, for folks like her to find stable homes, and I urge the council to reject Ordinance 701. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next registered speaker is Isaac Elster. Hey. How are you?
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you all. My name is Isaac Elster, and I'm a proud resident of the family-oriented neighborhood of Sheridan. I will start by admitting I am not fluent in political or legal language. However, In attempting to study this issue, I've listened to community members in whose political and legal fluency I trust. And I want to amplify one particular concern raised by them: to beware of sudden changes to zoning codes under the guise of updating legalese and removing red tape. Such changes can provide copious opportunities for predatory corporate and governmental actors to take further advantage of communities like mine. These warnings against predators, I believe, appeal to our shared patriotic beliefs in communal liberty and individual freedom. These warnings can be heeded in the course of efforts to protect our struggling neighborhoods while also offering genuine, I would hope, assistance to our unhoused and disabled neighbors. So I offer my heartfelt gratitude and encouragement to this city's elected officials and also city advocates as they ensure that no single amendment is passed that would enable governmental overreach and create unnatural, un-American advantages for powerful and predatory outsiders, whether they be developers living large in Manhattan or Beverly Hills, or whether they be politicos within the Beltway or in Harrisburg. We're already dealing with enough problems from those types. Our communities do not need homegrown efforts to facilitate that predation. God bless and peace be with you all.
Thank you.
Matthew Bruchon. Matthew?
Matt's trying to get on Zoom, but the Zoom is having an issue.
Okay.
It seems that the council room is not.
Okay, I apologize for that. Will you let us know if that comes back on? Thank you. Just the network on 509 is not working. 5 to 9. Kristen Allen. Kristen Allen. Herbert Joseph. Herbert Joseph. Herbert Joseph. He's trying to get back on. Which one, Matthew? Cable's trying to get back on. I apologize for this delay. Please give us a minute. Thank you. Okay, so the network is down, and I apologize to those waiting to try to get on. We're going to continue to try to work on that. In the meantime, that exhausts our list of registered speakers. We'll come back to these people after we get the network back up, and they will get their 3 minutes. But in the meantime, we're going to see, is there anyone in the audience that has not been able to address City Council? We will give 1 minute to any unregistered speaker. They can have 1 minute to speak. Please line up, and please line up. Yeah. Wait, yeah. Were there any registered speakers in the audience that did not get to speak? You were registered? Okay. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. I'm a homeowner, and I was raised in Sheridan, and I'm a 45-year resident of Elliott. The most important thing that government can do is to allow the residents, not progressive groups who have their own agenda, to control what happens in their community. A good government listens to the residents, taking away the right of residents to know of the changes and giving them the opportunity to voice their concerns and working with the government with proposed changes that affects their neighborhoods is not a good government. It's a sneaky government. Government works great when everyone presents government works great when everyone presents nothing but the facts and have open conversations. It's not professional to undermine the residents and the council members to push a socialist agenda. Pittsburgh United is a socialist progressive organization, and they do not have the best interests of the Pittsburgh residents. What is being proposed with housing and zoning in Pittsburgh is very concerning to taxpayers. There are different reasons why people are homeless. We have our veterans who are homeless. They just don't need a roof over their head. They must be provided with mental health services. You also have families and individuals who are down on their luck. They may be holding down a job but just can't afford housing. They are desperately trying to hold things together. They need services. We can all learn from what Tunnels to Towers is doing for our veterans, and they are actually placing a facility in Philadelphia. You also have individuals battling addiction. I have witnessed a girl in the fetal position outside the laundromat in Elliott. I have seen two people across from the Elliott fire station leaning over with their heads almost to the ground. There was an individual who lived on my street who was addicted. For 3 years, the neighbors dealt with police coming mostly on a weekly basis, sometimes with social workers on hand to assist and offer the person help. The individual always refused to help. These are 3 examples that I have witnessed. These people just don't need a roof over their head. They need at the least 6 months of inpatient rehab before going into housing. They will also need outpatient services. They must be required to get help through inpatient before you put them into housing, or is the plan to just put the burden on the residents? Undocumented migrants who enter our country illegally, they are not citizens. I'm sure people in this room have different opinions on this, but I do think people will not be comfortable not knowing what kind of vetting, if any, is taking place. And I'm sure nobody wants to be living next door to unvetted,
Sandy,
undocumented migrants.
thank you. Your time's expired.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's
the
all right.
buzzard
Thank
stopped.
you.
Yeah, no, we're going to come back to online after we get exhausted. The speakers are now standing in line here, so we're going to take them. I apologize. Go ahead.
Okay, I've been sitting here listening, and the problem here, we don't have any definition of disability. Homelessness is not a disability, so will these people be vented? No, we all agree on autism, physically disabled, Down syndrome, are disabled, but when you start getting into drug addiction and mental health issues, you can get into real violent and criminal thing. That's what the neighborhoods are afraid of. You're not defining what a disability is, and we as neighborhoods do not have the power to control that. Now, and if this goes through, you're going to see corporate people. The one man was right. Come in, and they're going to go into the neighborhoods that they can make the most money out of. Ones like Sheridan, Homewood, and it won't spill over into the more affluent neighborhoods. And that's what we're afraid of as residents. So be careful what you wish for. And homelessness is not a disability.
Thank
so
you. Next
everybody
speaker,
has to be vented.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the council members that found time to come here tonight. My name is Mike Deal. I'm your constituent. I contacted your office due to a house next door to me who has woods, fallen wood, trash, complete garbage. I found out through your staff that I was probably the 7th person to contact you regarding that home. Nothing has been done about it. That was 5 months ago. I received a vague text saying that it was added to the existing file. Nothing was done. The house next door to me burned to the ground. It has been since vacated. I wanted to buy that property. I recontacted your office, and nobody could give me any information on how to contact that property owner or how to. There were 15 people on the deed. I think there was probably 9. I'm being a little bit dramatic. However, I can't kick anything back to you. So now you take the voice of the people out of the situation so that you can work with a corporation who can do that for you. So why don't you help me improve my neighborhood?
Thank you. Thank you. Your time's up.
Hello, I am 3rd generation in my home in Banksville. I have children who actually are autistic and OCD disabilities. I would love for them to be able to walk to the same corner store that I went to get my dad's cigarettes early in the morning in the 80s. They can't. My children catch the bus right on the corner across the street from the place that is housing criminals. They might be disabled, but they're criminals. And my 14-year-old daughter gets, today, she actually confessed that she flipped somebody off and they stopped the car. She was threatened, okay? This is what's happening. And I want to know why you're moving it out into our neighborhoods and you're building a freaking circus downtown. They're putting a Ferris wheel there. Build a home. Do something for those homeless. Don't bring them out here. We're trying to get out of the city.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Joellen Marsh. I'm a homeowner in Sheridan, and my perspective is informed by my work at Unity Recovery. There are many people that I work with who are disabled and are homeless because they are disabled. There are many people who need homes, especially who are from Sheridan. When I say I love living in Sheridan, I talk about it all the time. And when I'm talking to folks who I encounter who are unhoused, they say, my family's from there. I grew up there. I was born there. We need more community homes and more access. I agree that we need to understand more about the Fair Housing Act, but I don't think that Bill 701 is going to address those issues. I oppose Bill 701 because I think that it's going to make it more difficult to give us homes, and homes are the things that will reduce violence, will reduce the unhoused population, will reduce mental health, and even if every single person in the county had no mental health issues, no substance use, and had a full-time job, we would still have people who are unhoused. Thank you.
Thank you. Stop over there and meet all your Sheridan neighbors. Next speaker, please.
Peace, good evening. Councilwoman.
Hi, Kent.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Got a mighty task ahead of you. I'm here this evening because I'm Kent Bay, Moorish American, U.S. military veteran, third generation of men in my family have served in the U.S. military, as well as my family, 3 generations living in Pittsburgh. So kind of know the lay of the land here. I'm here this evening because I've been here before on behalf of veterans and their families that have been dealing with homelessness. We have a lot of veterans and their families in your district, as well as all of your district. Last year, William Hardison, obviously, was gunned down to death by over 70 law enforcement officers. And we haven't heard anything about that. No one has contacted me from the city council or any organization to come up with any solutions about that. And I would like to speak with all of you, actually. And it still has traumatized me, as well as many other veterans, that want answers and how we're going to house our military veterans and their families. So
Thank you, Kent.
I appreciate that and look forward to speaking with each and every one of you.
You have my number. Call me.
I will.
Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lindsay Kalfleisch. I live and work in District 2. I work in the West End for a nonprofit, Teresa PMT. I've been very involved in. I'm the marketing manager there. Live in Banksville. Marion Manor is my backyard. If you're in Marion Manor, you can see it in my backyard. I have a 2-year-old precious girl. And I think we're talking about 2 different things here. What I don't want, and I cannot leave this room without saying it, is I do not want people, dangerous people, who can see in my backyard, make my neighborhood dangerous, who could see my little girl. That is my life. And I will be damned if that ends up, in my backyard. And I know there are people that need help, and I want them to get help. I don't have the answers. That's not my job to have the answers. People with disabilities, I understand. I think we're talking about different types of people here. And not enough time to go into all of that, but I do think we're talking about a couple different things. I don't have the answers, but I just wanted to make sure I said my piece about it because I have a lot of concerns, and I love my neighborhood. I love where I work. I love where I live. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Christina Formartino. I've been in the housing field for about 15 years in the city of Pittsburgh, and I oppose Bill 701. We need to make it much more easier for people to get homes. Sometimes the answer is that simple. Sometimes it just takes a home. To the individuals that are not in this room but are being spoken about, my friends, I adore you. We will find housing. We will work around any of the situations that are created by the city council.
Next speaker.
Hi, my name's Christine Doyle. I live in District 4 in East Brookline, and I'm a homeowner, a taxpayer. And I've spoken to a number of my neighbors in Brookline about Bill 0701. And generally, we believe that it is very advantageous to have the community understand and get a warning of what might transpire in our neighborhoods. You know, having a hearing doesn't mean that something gets voted down. It just means that there's an opportunity to be heard, which is the essence of democracy, actually. I think that I agree with the individual who said that sunshine is the best disinfectant, and not knowing what that Fair Housing Act, what basically is involved, perhaps, in the Fair Housing Act proposal, and not knowing what the motivation is, makes us want all the more to have the hearings in our community to understand what's happening.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Erin Coper. And my name is Mary Beth Pucci.
Wait. You have to speak one at a time.
Oh, sorry. I'm not going to speak.
Okay.
I'm just standing here with Erin
Okay, go
because I
ahead.
support what she's
Go ahead,
about
Erin.
to say. Thank you. And I just want to say, I want to thank my councilwoman, Teresa Kale Smith, for her courage and for protecting the democratic process. And I want to say I've lived in the West End, Elliott, for 9 years. I am a homeowner. My husband and I are from a suburb of Pittsburgh, from Weirton, West Virginia, Steeltown as well. And it has been our dream to live and grow roots in this beautiful city that we grew up coming to. And I just want to say we are at an inflection point, because which way are we going to go? I just recently spoke on stage to the nation addressing the public safety crisis in this city. And the nation is watching. They have been paying attention to our state, which was pivotal this November. And I pray that we choose the right way for the safety of our residents.
Thank you. Your time.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Alexander. I am a longtime resident of Sheridan, and I am also the president of the Sheridan Community Council. And I just want to say, Teresa, thank you for your strong leadership on this issue and for supporting Sheridan, the West End, and the Mount.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Eric Kalbflesh. I'm a resident of Banksville. Bought a house about 7 years ago. Loved the peaceful, quiet neighborhood with residents that cared about each other, get together often for get-togethers, and really have family values. Growing a small family and sharing a border with the Marion Manor facility is very concerning to us on Rose Garden Road. I would love for transparency to understand what's coming, what we can do, work together. I want to maintain safety for my family and willing to move and leave the city for that safety if needed.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council. As you know, my name is William Anderson. I'm chair of the Allegheny County Democratic Black Caucus, and I'm chief of staff for the Democratic National Committee Black Caucus, and I am here to speak about our community's opposition to this. Right? We are tired of backroom deals from this administration. We are tired of our city council members being blindsided and finding about things from the public that they didn't know about. And we think that the people from the administration that made falsified, unsworn statements need to be prosecuted, because it is illegal for anyone to make false statements, whether it's under sworn testimony or unsworn testimony, when it is dealing with zoning board and authorities. So that was an illegal statement, an illegal practice in order to push the mayor's agenda. So as a community representative from the homeward Russian community that's already dealing with problems from homeless shelters, we deeply oppose and we demand that our city council members vote against this.
Thank you. And we're going to hear from council members in a minute, but there are two more speakers that are still online. We restored the service. We're going to go to Matthew Bruchon. Matthew?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Sorry for the long delay, and thank you for holding on.
Yeah, thanks for the chance to speak tonight. I appreciate it.
Sure.
I'm Matthew Bruchon. I've been a resident of Garfield for the last 7 years, and I've also owned a home here for that long. And tonight I wanted to speak to express my opposition to Bill 701 and my support for the Fair Housing Amendments. To me, both of these bills are, at a very fundamental and basic level, they're about how we treat the least fortunate of our neighbors. We've heard some sentiments tonight that we should bar immigrants, that we should bar the homeless and mentally ill people from our neighborhoods. And I don't feel that way at all. I want our community, and I also want my neighborhood, Garfield, to be one where we not only learn to accept and live with these folks, but also welcome them, even if it's challenging, and offer them the best social services that we can, and welcome them with open arms. I think that we are defined by how we treat the least well-off members of our community. For 701, we're talking about neighbors with disabilities. I strongly believe that disabled folks and their community homes do belong in our neighborhoods, and I can't imagine wanting to add any extra red tape to the process of creating housing. I think it should be made as easy as possible for everyone to have good housing, including setting up new houses for those who need it the most. And I feel like fundamentally, Bill 701 would just make it harder for us to all do a good thing. That's why I'm strongly against 701. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. And Kristen Allen. Kristen Allen? Please tell me we can connect to Kristen Allen.
Hi.
Oh, good.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. Thank you so much. Thank you for your waiting.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, no worries. Okay. Hi, my name is Kristen Allen. I've lived in Pittsburgh for almost a decade. My husband and I are homeowners and taxpayers in East Liberty, so we have also invested in this community. I registered to speak tonight because I oppose Ordinance 701, and I ask that we move on to discuss the Fair Housing Amendment. I support safe and affordable housing for all of us and all of our neighbors to live in dignity. I understand that tonight we're talking about community homes specifically for disabled people. A lot of folks tonight have brought up the general climate downtown, and I feel called to stand up for our unhoused neighbors there. I worked on Smithfield Street for 2 years at the Department of Human Services. I actually worked really closely with Nick Cotter, whose Pittsburgh Neighborhood Project was mentioned earlier. I always admired his work to protect and serve people in need. In my time working downtown and my experience volunteering at a shelter, I was exposed to many more unhoused people than I had met before. And at first I did find it uncomfortable in the way that many people here tonight seem to. But now I'm really grateful to have met those people who we served. I'm a young woman. I very frequently walked the length of Smithfield Street in the dark to my bus stop at the end of the day, and never, in my years working there, walking alone in the dark, I never felt concerned for my safety around unhoused people downtown. There were folks I saw all the time who would greet me in the morning and the evening on my walk to and from the office. I believe that respect and acceptance are family values, and when we put respect and acceptance out into the world, that is what we receive in return. We need to make it easier to house people. Thank you.
Thank you, and that exhausts our list of speakers. And thank you for everyone for coming. I'll be the last to speak tonight, but I'm going to start here with Councilman Wilson and go work our way around.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Council President Pro Tem.
I appreciate that. Thanks everyone for coming today and sharing all of your different perspectives. And I guess this solidifies the promise that you have made, Councilwoman, that
We'd have a meeting.
if you have an issue with something, that you will fill a room. And so that is what happened
Oh,
here.
no, there was a tornado warning, we would have had more. So-
Yeah.
And the letter just hit today.
But, to get to the specifics of what was being discussed this evening, obviously a lot of people went off, and even in the presentation, I can see how it could be, thought of it, this was more than for Bill 701 today. And so tried to pick through everyone's comments because everyone's always obviously speaking to the main issue is just whether or not, both bills speak to each other. Literally one would delete, sections of this bill. So I do find it understandable that people will go off and talk about more than 701. Given that, representing District 1 is a unique district since we have multiple homeless shelters, and that has been mentioned here several times. It's also been mentioned that there are, other types of group homes that people are worried about coming into their district, being next to where they live. And from my experience representing District 1, those areas, those types of housing or shelters have historically been welcomed whenever there is a provider that's immediately presented to the community. And so I often wonder in these conversations about these zoning changes if the obvious thing everyone probably thinks I'm going to say is that it's the way you approach it, and the way it's been approached here I'm not used to, where things are sent from the mayor's administration over to city planning first. So that is new to me, and obviously that has been an issue here, and that is an interesting tactic to get approval there first. So that is definitely an issue that has caused a lot of upset people, and to manage that, because everyone is a part of Pittsburgh, I think is the challenge. And to really involve council on the front end, and so that we can involve our communities, as I think always what the councilwoman has talked about. And so I respect that perspective. Did I say that right? Respect that perspective. Because
it's 8:30. Who cares?
Yeah, because I ran out of caffeine. It's just that whenever you're in these community meetings where these providers are presenting their plan for this type of housing, that there are some people that will never be happy, but it always is very important to talk about the providers that would care for the individuals there, and the amount of care that would be given. So I think that is very important in this conversation, and that is not really shown through just simple change. You can't really have those conversations whenever it's just simple changes of the zoning code, where they just change letters in the use table here, and it really confuses people as to what that means. And there's really there's not really like any sort of parameters that would have to be followed. I don't want to get into it. Obviously, to provide housing to certain individuals that would take advantage of what the administration has sent over to the Planning Commission, and they have already approved and has yet to come to council, that type of housing would require some sort of support in terms of funding for that types of housing. And that type of housing is, whether it be I don't know, let's just say it's a type of voucher that could be used to support people that are in that house, that usually is tied, say they get from the housing authority, that usually is tied to some sort of provider that has to be there. And I'm just finding out through different meetings that it is the number one thing for people to understand who actually would be, I guess the house person mainly that would be in these group homes. But when it's larger units that we're talking about, which really wouldn't be in this, because this is up to 10 people. I mean, there's just so much in here to really pick through, and I'm really looking forward to what's going to happen here over the next several months, actually, because I don't think we're going to get anywhere with this anytime soon. But there are a lot of details here that aren't being discussed, that are pretty, in depth, and I think it's above a lot of our heads as to what that means. And I think we'll probably have several conversations, briefings, and quite frankly, we should probably have seminars as to what is happening in the zoning code here before we just make some blanket changes. But looking forward to those conversations, because I don't think this is going to end anytime soon. But it is concerning to me, though, that there are, that we are just singling out individuals that are, in need of housing, and we don't want to be demonizing people, but at the same time, when people don't see that the city is actually handling that correctly, it does leave people thinking that a government run by Democrats can't handle, what's happening outside. And so, once again, in District 1, we're faced with that all the time, and we do need to handle that better. I know the city doesn't handle the homelessness situation 100%. We have to work with the county, but there definitely needs to be more accountability on how we handle it, and making sure that our public spaces are our public spaces. And when people continually look outside and see that that's not happening, that the public doesn't feel safe, that there is that sense of their safety is at risk, then we need to be held accountable, and we need to make it safer. So it's quite a balance here, but looking forward to making sure that we can at least get somewhere with this. And thank you for having this tonight.
Thank you.
And I'm going to relieve my time. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and staying so late. I know you've had a very long day. Councilman Coghill?
First of all, I want to thank everybody here. Give yourselves a round of applause. It's 9:30 at night. Come on. It's for or against. It doesn't matter, for the fact that you showed up and you care about your city one way or the other. So now I want to begin with Councilwoman Kill-Smith. Okay. I've seen messages, text messages, emails saying that she doesn't care about the unhoused people and different things that are just so off track. I got to tell you, this woman's got the biggest heart in the city of Pittsburgh. She will give the shirt off your back. She has brought homeless people to me, and we've supplied them with jobs, okay? So she has a body of work in this field that she does all the time. She doesn't brag about it. She doesn't talk about it, but I know what she does, and I want you to know where she's at, because nobody has a bigger heart and cares more about the unhoused than this woman, I feel. So I heard a lot tonight about, we need a place for people to go, which we do, right? So I am compelled to tell you about what City Council has been doing for the past 2.5 years, okay? Nobody has done more towards solving our unhoused population than this council as a body. And I will tell you, it started with this woman. She appointed 4 of us, myself, Councilwoman Wilson, Councilwoman Gross, and Councilwoman Strasburger, to a committee to solve and come up with solutions. We spent 9 months figuring out different scenarios, what other cities do. We researched. We came up with 4 different concepts. All are still on the table. All can work today, okay? Again, we spent 9 months on this. We had professional architects draw us up plans, and we haven't gotten the cooperation we wanted from other, whether it be the county, whether it be the administration. We're still looking for that cooperation, but we're continuing on. Furthermore, I will tell you that just yesterday, Councilwoman Gross and I pulled out legislation from the Fair Housing Act, knowing that it's going to be problematic, I feel, to get passed or even get to our table. We pulled it out specifically for our homeless plan in order to for interim housing. It's the interim housing section of it. This is so we have the option to go along anywhere in the city of Pittsburgh where there's industrial sites where they build hotels, and I'll let Councilman Gross maybe follow up on that a little bit for me. But this was done out of compassion. We've spent now 2.5 years coming up with different concepts and different plans. We pulled this legislation out so we can do something. So I want you to know that this council has been working very, very hard. I think harder than any other body in the city of Pittsburgh, and for that matter in Western Pennsylvania. So it's tough. It's a tough situation. It really is hard. Things don't move as fast and as quickly as we want, but we've come up with plans to have managed, safe, secure sites, and we feel that's the best avenue to go. I will say Deborah Wiley, who I think she called in, this legislation, that 701 opposes, she said the best word I found is dumbfounded. I am dumbfounded. I really am. This should not be presented to this city. We have plans out there that we can act on. We can move on tomorrow, okay? Don't be fooled. We don't need this in that legislation in order to find housing for our unhoused. We don't. We have multiple plans on the table. I expect and I think they will eventually come to fruition, and I look forward to that day. So I stand behind you 100%, Councilwoman. You have done a fantastic job. Your leadership on this has been fantastic. So yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to have to say, when I see somebody who's homeless and I tell Councilman Coco, he gives them a job and helps them get into housing and everything. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
Right.
It's not me, it's you.
And that's what I want people to know that we're doing behind the scenes. So we're not here fluffing anything off, saying, oh, we don't want them in our neighborhood. I know I've heard that a lot tonight, Here's the thing. We represent the people. And, if people are unsecure about this, we have better plans already on the books that we need to follow that wouldn't even inhibit this. We wouldn't even be here talking about this tonight. This didn't have to be in the Fair Housing Act. I could never vote for it in its current form, I will tell you. I think it needs to be tossed out. And then we could talk about the rest of the Fair Housing Act and as to where we can go. But as I see it, there's just no way this is going to pass. If there were no other options, I would consider it, honestly. But again, this council, I encourage you to look at our work, our body of work, and you'll see the other options that are out there today that we can follow up on tomorrow. And if it weren't for us pulling that legislation out yesterday, hopefully we'll get that passed through in a couple months. That's the route we should be going on. We need partners in trying to solve this problem. We've been working very hard at it, and I want your support. I want you coming down here when our legislation comes back and speaking in favor of that legislation so we can go after something real, something that we've put a lot of thought and a lot of effort in, okay? So I see here tonight, I've counted, I think it was 36 for 701 and 12 opposed, okay? I'm not saying that's the vibe of the city overall, but it's certainly a pretty good indication. So I stand with the people who support 701. I stand with you, Councilwoman. Again, thank you for your leadership, and thank you all again for coming out.
Thank you. Councilman Charlin?
So I want to first off thank Council President Emeritus Cale Smith for...
Nobody calls me that. Teresa.
Yeah. For hosting this tonight. It isn't quite 9:30, Councilman Coghill. It is 8:44. But I do think it is important to acknowledge there's a lot of things that we can question about Councilman Cale Smith. I don't think anything we could ever question is your heart. Your heart is always in the right place. You have the biggest heart here on the council, and I think everyone in your district knows that. There's a reason that there was a heart on your yard signs in your last election. That kind of describes you very well. And when I hear the fear mongering and the kind of challenges against Councilwoman Cale Smith, in terms of attacks on her or her character, I challenge you to bring it. Councilwoman Cale Smith is not someone to back down from a fight like that. And in fact, I think those kind of things rile her up. And I I don't, I don't think that you're going to win that battle there. But I do also want to acknowledge some comments that were made tonight about the legislation at hand. The one thing that really struck with me is the way that the city, this administration, and the powers that be view neighborhoods south of the river. And we do not get the same shake that the rest of the city does. I think there's a reason that that members here were from west and from south, and had a lot to say about that, because I do think that we are treated differently in the city here, and I hope one day that is something that we can change. As for the legislation that we're discussing here, the legislation that has been proposed at the Planning Commission is some of the most complicated legislation that I've ever seen. And I dealt with the Oakland plan, which probably was the most complicated zoning amendments that have come through council here. The legislation essentially takes a bunch of different uses, renames them, and then changes what we can do with them. It is far too big and far too complicated of legislation to do with one piece of legislation unless you're trying to rush something through. And I don't think this body should be the body that rushes something through. I don't have the appetite to rush something through. And I hope that we're able to slow this down and make sure that there's a full accounting for what actually this legislation does, so we can make apples to apples comparisons and see how this affects all of our neighbors here. I also want to, acknowledge the just lack of communication again from, I'm learning about this largely through the media, through Sean Carter, who works in our council. We're not learning about this from the administration. So I do think that speaks to, seeing us and seeing you as a rubber stamp that the administration is happy to work through, specifically folks south of the river that are, that are accounted for here and just kind of taken for granted. So I want to see better solutions. I want to see better communication. I want to see us represented and us have an opportunity to have a seat at the table here. And I think there's a reason that Councilman Cale Smith, Councilman Coghill, and myself, representing south of the river neighborhoods, are all standing unified here. And I want to thank you all for being here, and thank the clerk's office and the Cable Bureau for working a late night here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Charlie. Councilwoman Warwick.
Thank you, Councilwoman. So Councilwoman Smith and I do not always see eye to eye.
You're a little bit taller.
Well, that's true. But I will say that she is the most dedicated public servant you are ever going to find. And I mean that as someone who has lived in a district that has been underrepresented and underserved, and as someone who came to this council in order to represent the underserved people in my district. So I want to say that first and foremost. So even though we don't agree on everything, right, we work together, and we work well together, because I think we have that same outlook. Just as sort of a point of, just sort of a note of order, I think that we did get a lot of emails too, and I think we got about 16 emails. I think they were mostly in opposition.
We'll wait till you see tomorrow.
Okay, well, but I just wanted to say, for folks who did write emails. Okay, so I do want to start out just by talking about the homeless or unhoused. I do not like the demonization of our unhoused neighbors that we have heard today. I do not like it. I think it is mean. However, I understand that it's grounded in fear. I do understand that. But our unhoused neighbors are literally the most vulnerable people in our city. And when we talk about safety, there is no place that is less safe for a woman on her own than sleeping in a tent under a bridge. And I think we need to remember that. On January 30th of this year, the sort of point in time count in our of folks seeking of folks in our emergency shelters and countywide was 1,026. So that's just to give everyone kind of an idea. That's those point in time counts aren't perfect, but it's what we have. And in 2023, 75% of the people seeking shelter beds are what we call low needs. Low needs means that they are not addicted to drugs, they do not have mental illness, they do not need wraparound services. What they need is housing. They need a place to stay. 75% of the people seeking emergency shelter. So, and a large number of those people, and I know that people in this room can relate to this, are people who simply could no longer make the rent because the rent is so unbelievably high. I know there are people in this room whose children and grandchildren are leaving the city, are going to Monroeville, they're going to Munhall, they're going to Westmoreland because they cannot afford to live here in Pittsburgh. I know that I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I know that there are many of you in this room. So, and every day I get emails, and I know my fellow council members get emails saying, what are we going to do about getting these people off of our street? In the media, we are constantly being hammered, and I'm not upset about it. It's valid, but we are constantly being hammered about getting the homeless out of downtown, clean up downtown. So it really but at the same time, people, because they're fearful, because there is a lot of fear-mongering that goes on around the homeless, and we've seen some things that are upsetting, right? So people don't want the homeless in their community. So it really puts us between a rock and a hard place, right? It really puts us between a rock and a hard place. So with that, I want to move on to sort of the city versus the county. Oh, and I do want to say, the folks who stayed, who are still here, thank you. Because, we get this a lot at council, like people come and they want to yell at us, but they don't actually want to hear what we have to say at the end, right? So I very much appreciate people who stayed to kind of hear what we have to say, right, as the sort of folks at the table here. So the city versus the county. The county, the Department of Human Services, has, a $1 billion budget, $1 billion a year from the federal government for human services. Since the pandemic, the county has let this problem because this is since the pandemic, right? Everybody across the country, right? Homelessness has skyrocketed. County leadership since the pandemic has let this problem fester. And we have new leadership at the county, but it's been less than a year. These problems are Herculean. We have new leadership at the county that has made housing a priority. And I know it feels slow, but I promise you that they are working on it, that this is this is what they ran on, right? At the city, in the meantime, to fill the gap that has been left by the county, quite frankly, in their $1 billion budget over all these years, at the city, we have built out literally an entire public safety bureau to fill this gap. It is the Office of Community Health and Safety. It is a social services bureau that has been created to help provide the social services, to do co-respond, and it's not just for homelessness, but for all manner of things. But it is essentially a social services bureau. They work with our police, they work with our firefighters, they work with our paramedics to kind of supplement and help these folks who so desperately need help in our city. So, for the first time in basically a decade, right? This is the first time that the city and the county are actually working together on these problems. And as city council members, it's important to remember that yes, we represent our districts, but we also are tasked with making good decisions that benefit the city as a whole. So, that is our job too. It is not just to represent the folks in our districts. They're the ones who vote for us. That's true. That's definitely true. But we are, as a body, we are tasked with doing what's best for the city as a whole, in addition to our districts. So, next, the Fair Housing Bill versus Councilwoman Smith's bill. So, like these two bills that we're talking about. I had actually wanted to do what's called a post agenda, where we have everybody come and sit down at the table and talk it out, et cetera, before this public hearing, just to kind of put both bills together on the table. I was, unfortunately, and I fault myself for this, I was sort of talked out of doing that. My hope was kind of to push everyone toward a compromise by kind of, pushing the issue. I wish I had done that, and maybe I will going forward. But I want to acknowledge that the Fair Housing Bill is not a perfect bill, and that the rollout to council should have been better, right? So that we all so that we could be better informed ourselves, so that we could better inform you, right, as council members. That ship has sailed, or what do we say? At any rate. There is a public process with all of it now, and I love that folks are now interested in but we do have public, there's public hearings, city planning, zoning board, there's lots of public hearings. They're not always super easy to get to if they're in the middle of the day, but these public processes are built in. I just want to make that clear. I don't like this idea that stuff was sort of snuck in. What didn't happen, in my opinion, is that council members were not adequately informed, right? Council members were not sat down and kind of said, look, this is the thing that we're trying to do here, so that then council members could be like, okay, this is, so, and that is why Councilwoman, I don't speak for her, but it seems that she sent out letters to, to folks to kind of say, hey, this is happening and I'm upset. And that's good, right? She's doing what she needs to do for her district. I don't want to get into the kind of nuts and bolts of the fair housing, because we need to talk about that more. I think more discussions to come. We certainly need public input. You can't put something in a neighborhood without telling anybody. I think that ZBA hearings are the process for that. Excuse me, can I speak? Are you done? Thank you.
Yeah, we're listening to you. We're trying to figure out why you didn't send out the letters.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, for one thing, the cost of sending out paper letters is incredibly high. All right?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
But we can talk about that another time. At any rate. So ZBA hearings include public comment, right? You can come and comment on a ZBA hearing. My concern about changing the rules around establishing community homes, personal homes, whatever you want to call them, right? And this is Councilwoman Smith's bill that I'm talking about now, 701. My concern about that is that you are putting politics before people. And I have seen myself in my own district where the areas with the most voters, the areas with the most money, the areas with the most power have the most influence. Often, not always, but often have the most influence over elected officials. And so you have areas that are underserved. I'm hearing this south of the river, folks, south of the river, there aren't as many of you, right? There aren't as many of you as there are in the East End. So if you start taking votes at council, people are going to be thinking about their own constituents, right? Well, my constituents don't want it in my, like, Mike here, and so you have people making political decisions for their own reelection when we should have people who are experts, the Zoning Board of Adjustment, making those decisions based on the information in front of them. That's just my take on it. And as to the community homes, I've heard from a number of folks who run community homes in my district for disabled people of various types, small community homes, right? And some of those, most of the homes are wonderful, right? They do a wonderful job. There's some that are really bad, right? Like bad things happen. But that's not really an issue with the zoning of the homes. That's an issue of the enforcement of the licensing requirements and those types of things, right? At any rate, I've said a lot. I think that we have more to do here. I think that we can reach a compromise here. But, it's going to take some time. And Councilwoman, I hope that we can work together. I know we've already worked together quite a bit on this. And
looking forward to working with everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
Councilwoman Gross.
Thank you. I'm not going to repeat any of the good points that my colleagues have made, and I do appreciate everyone being here. We take careful notes. We really, really value hearing directly from residents across the city. Of course, as council members, we more often are hearing from the residents we represent, so it's really valuable to have these public hearings where we get to hear from everyone from across the city. I just want to clarify maybe a couple of the things that were referred to by my colleagues. Councilwoman Smith's bill, as many of you know, is 2024-0701. The Fair Housing Omnibus package that was presented, kind of summarized at the beginning of the presentation, isn't in our legislative database. You cannot access it on the City Council Legistar. That's correct, Madam Clerk, is it not? Correct. But it is available on the City Planning website because the Planning Commission agendas and records are also public. So if you kind of just put in your search terms like Pittsburgh planning, and they call their website the Engage page, you can download the whole PDF. And then Councilman Coghill, and that is going to have the number, I think Mr. Carter presented in the package, that bill number will be, if it ever gets to the council table, 2024-0984. Councilman Coghill referred to a bill that he and I introduced yesterday, which takes a subset that really is a revisiting of the bill that he and I introduced a year ago that has targeted areas of the city that we think if you can build 300 apartment buildings, that's a place where you should be able to convert buildings to shelters, again, but with public input and public process. That new bill is 2024-1214. And I'll just tell you, and I encourage everybody, and I do this all the time, please do try to access the documents and look at them yourselves. I will just show you that this is Councilwoman Smith's bill 0701. This is the Planning Commission Omnibus bill, and I've been studying it since the summer. And so since the Planning Commission passed it, and I have notes and Post-its all over so it's much, much larger and much more difficult to understand. And hopefully the bill that we introduced yesterday, 1214, will not be as difficult to discuss. I will affirm some of Councilwoman Warwick's stories about the people that we know that are part of our unhoused population. I've had residents approach me who were living in shelters begging me not to ever repeat their name because they're from my district. They have large extended families in my district, their cousins, their uncles, their grandparents, and they don't know they're homeless. Right? So if you're part of a big Pittsburgh family, like I am, you may also be in that situation. We also know that the biggest increase in our population outdoors is women and kids and the elderly. I had a situation recently in my district where we got a call about a tent, and it were people who had never been on house a day in their lives. Luckily, we only spent one night in the tent in our district. We were able to get our new department of social workers that we've hired with our city money, over 20 social workers, whereas the county, has the $1 billion and social workers who are just not doing, we're just not keeping up with the growing population and the growing problems that we have across the city. And they were great, and they were able to connect them with shelter. And we'll be following that situation. And I've also had a married couple in a tent in my district for months in a churchyard. Because they were on the waiting list for housing. They're on the waiting list. The waiting list is like a year long. So it's a really tough situation. So that the population isn't all the same. We are, I think, going to continue. Again, we've been working on it several years. We're going to continue to try to make headway there. Having said that, I do respect that we have had the legislation on the books for decades about community homes that really were focused just on people who needed, I think the definition is people who needed assistance with their basic needs like bathing, eating, mobility, medicines. And that's historically been the people that were being cared for in community homes. So we definitely need to have more robust conversation. But again, that legislation is not even in front of us. It's in front of you find it on the Planning Commission pages, and those are the changes that are in that bill that we're not technically here tonight to discuss. So thank you all for your input. It is very late, and we really value seeing you tonight. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yeah. Councilman.
I did just want to clarify, just so we're all on the same page, that when people go and search for these bills, that the ominous bills that were mentioned, like in the presentation, and that you're referring to, you can search for them on Legistar. They're 2024. Yeah. Yeah, so it's 984. So it is.
When I just looked, it wasn't there.
Yeah, so it is there. So if you go, you can search for it. So you don't have to go to city planning. You could.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So 2024-0984, you'll see the whole package of bills.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Charlin, did you want to say second round?
Yeah, just real quickly, a couple very brief comments. One, the discussion of the county's role in DHS, I think that's really important. The county is chartered with the role of our social services in a way that the city is not. They're funded in a way that the city is not. I am as excited about the current county executive as anyone is. However, I do want to acknowledge that the previous county executive had a director to solve the homelessness problem, and the current county executive kept that same director for DHS. So we do need to acknowledge that the process hasn't changed from the previous county executive to the new county executive, and that it does fall on the city to do something different here to solve our problem, and that we do need to think differently. Again, I do want to, as I've often said, we need to start thinking about the housing and abundance agenda, what we can do to not create restrictions on building new housing, but actually build more housing in abundance in the areas that need it, and not just mandates to try to solve our affordability crisis here. We need to build the housing that people want to see, and really make a dent in our affordability problem, and not just try to do it with fancy things here like this bill here. So I want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to thank you all for coming out. I want to thank for those people online who waited and stayed online with us and spoke. But thank you all for coming out, whether we agree or disagree. I think the one thing we can acknowledge is that there's some issues that we need to work through for the city of Pittsburgh to be a great place for everyone to live. And I am going to say that for our district, we have a lot of great things going on in our district, but we do have some issues that we need to address. But I think part of the reason, I want to be very clear why I introduced my legislation, had absolutely nothing to do with the administration's legislation. I didn't know they were working on anything. My legislation was independent. It was because of my residents of Banksville, the residents of the West End, had been getting things happening in their community without any conversation with them, without any conversation with their council member, without any acknowledgement to anyone, just kept doing things without talking to people, and it kept making people feel more on edge. What are they doing? Why aren't they talking to us? Because previous administrations understood the value and valued the relationships they had with the public. So they spoke to the public and the council members and realized that there was a way to do things if they worked together. So when things started happening, it left me with, I had to do something to help to protect my residents. And I don't care who likes it, I'm going to always do what's best interest of my residents, because that's what I was elected to do. That doesn't mean that I don't want to help people that are homeless. I do it all the time. I don't talk about it. I don't go out on Facebook and say what I'm doing, but I do help people all the time, and people help me. And I will say that if I had known, and if the community had known that there was any of these conversations happening, then maybe we could have worked around and put things in that were things to protect residents. And that's the reason my whole legislation came about. I also lived with people with disabilities. My own family raised somebody with disabilities. And so when I hear these conversations, I just think you can make all the comments you want, but walk the walk I walked. So you haven't. So you don't really know, what I'm saying. So, but what I will say is that I think that we could have clarified things for people. I think we could have said, let's make sure we know the hours of operations. This is who's managing this. And partly why I think there is such apprehension whenever we're putting anybody or anyone different in any neighborhood is because we don't make sure properties are managed well. We let them become a nuisance in the community and we do nothing about it. Instead of making sure people are getting the treatment that they need if they need treatment, making sure they get resources they need if they need resources, and making sure they get the help and any type of help that they need. We don't do that well. We do have a lot of people getting a lot of grant money, which I'm going to look into, all the housing advocates, and making sure that we see what they're doing. And we're going to start. Kim in my office was an auditor, and so she's working with somebody from the Sheridan Community Council who's also a CPA and does a lot of auditing. And I will just say we're going to start looking at all those nonprofits to see why do we have such an issue still if we have this much money going out supposedly helping people and we're not seeing that result for the people that we represent. And we do represent the unhoused people just as much as we represent the people in homes, the renters, the property owners, and people that are visiting. We represent Pittsburgh. So for that said, I will just say if anybody else needs any clarification or they would like to know anything different, I apologize that a lot of people are just complaining that they just got their letter today. Carrick is really hot, and so I will say I'm very sorry. We did the best we could with the time we had, with the staff that we had, and the volunteers we had getting this all together. But we are already preparing just in case another letter has to go out. Before anything happens with this legislation, it will be before city planning, and there will have to be another hearing. So just so you know, anything with this legislation will have another hearing. So there will be another mailing. You're supposed to mail within 21 days prior, so there should be something. But if you need any clarification or you'd like to send your comments in, you can do so at any time at the city clerk's, at this email address, cityclerksoffice@pittsburghpa.gov. And it's up on the website, and you can find it online. And if you have any other concerns, you can call any one of your council members or offices, and we'll be glad to work with you. I do want to thank our clerk's office, who's always amazing. Sean Carter, he put most of this together from the very beginning. I want to thank him for all his work. He works for 9 members of council. Can you imagine? And all our staff. I can't imagine the stress that must be for people. I want to thank our cable bureau for being here, and Bill Lamar is a resident of Crafton Heights, and and Ira Lewis, a resident of Sheridan. John, you're adopted, our Sergeant at Arms, and our amazing community engagement office with Diane. Stand up, Diane. Stand, Diane. And Leanne Wilson, a resident of Mount Washington. Lori Marabello, resident of Banksville, and Kim Salnetra, who's the president. She's not only my chief of staff, she's the president of Banksville Civic Association. And so we have a lot of people here that represent the city on an everyday basis, who do care and want to see people helped. So with that said, if there's anything I'm hoping that we can work through this together. Can I have a thank you to my amazing colleagues? I thank the staff, right? You. Thank you to our amazing colleagues. They have been here all day with meetings, and they'll come in here first thing in the morning with some serious budget meetings. So thank you for being as amazing as you all are all the time. Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.